The name on the meal order belonged to a dead man. 7 years dead. Drowned. She'd buried the grief herself. Benny Clark is black, 29, and runs the overnight food service at St. Catherine Hospital. Sage green jacket, hospital badge, black non-slip shoes. A storm hammers the windows. Her sitter cancels, so her 6-year-old son sleeps in a back room under a nurse's watch. Upstairs, a luxury wing is sealed off. No staff allowed. She checks a family meal and freezes. Kang Min-jae, the Black Dragon, the Korean man she thought she lost to the sea. Now he lies on a ventilator, a black dragon tattoo climbing the left side of his neck, above the hospital collar. Tonight, someone authorized the machines to be shut off. She steps closer. She touches his hand. It is warm. Then a Korean matriarch in a pearl gray suit sees Benny's face and orders her removed from the floor. But her little boy has already slipped out of the back room. He recognizes the man from a photograph he keeps. He reaches the bed. He takes the still hand. And what happens when those fingers move? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The delivery cart hit the threshold of Ward 6 and jammed, and Benny Clark shoved it with her hip before the top tray could slide. 12 trays, 11 where they belonged. The 12th had a name she'd already served an hour ago, which meant somewhere in the building, a diabetic man on a renal restriction was about to get a stranger's salt. She caught it. 2 fingers on the lid, a quick read of the sticker, and she pulled the tray back off the cart before the aide could lift it. Not that one, Benny said. That's a repeat. Bed 12 already ate. The night aide blinked at her. It printed twice? It printed twice. Rain moved across the window at the end of the corridor in long gray sheets. St. Catherine Hospital sat 4 blocks from the river, and when the river got loud, the whole east side of the building seemed to lean into the weather. Benny had worked enough overnight shifts to read the storm by the sound the gutters made. Tonight the gutters were losing. She parked the cart against the wall and pulled her tablet from the side pocket of her sage green jacket. The dietary system had double-fired a ticket. It did that maybe once a month, always on the worst possible night, always for the patient who could least afford the wrong plate. She keyed in a correction, voided the duplicate, and flagged the bed for a fresh renal tray. 9 years in food service had taught her that the trays were never really about food. A tray was a promise. Somebody sick and scared in a bed had been told exactly what would keep them safe, and the tray was that promise made real 3 times a day. When the promise broke, it broke on the weakest person in the building, and it broke quietly, and nobody upstairs ever saw it happen. So Benny saw it. That was the job she'd built for herself, the one no title fully covered. Behind her, a monitor chimed and went quiet. Somewhere a call button lit, and a nurse's shoes squeaked toward it. You could just let the kitchen sort it in the morning, the aide offered. In the morning he's already sick. Benny handed back the good trays, one at a time, reading each sticker aloud. Bed 9, bed 10, bed 11, there, go. The aide went, carrying the good trays 2 at a time, and Benny watched the door swing shut behind him, to be sure it latched. It latched. Down the hall, a woman in 6A began to cry, not from pain, from the low, worn-out grief that came over patients somewhere around 3 in the morning, when the visitors were long gone and the ceiling was the only thing left to look at. A nurse would get to her. Benny marked it anyway, the way she marked everything, filed it under. Check that she ate her dinner, because half the time the 3 a.m. crying was a body that hadn't been fed right and didn't know that was the reason. Benny stood alone in the corridor for exactly 3 seconds. That was all the stillness the shift allowed her, and she'd learned to take it in 3-second pieces. She rolled her shoulders. Her feet had gone from aching to numb somewhere around the 10 o'clock meal count, which was its own kind of mercy. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. She knew before she looked. There was only one person who texted her at 11:40 on a Tuesday, and it was never good news at 11:40. I'm so sorry. My mother fell. I have to go to her tonight. I can't stay with Malachi. I'm so sorry, Benny. The sitter, Denise. 2 hours into a 12-hour overnight, and the sitter was gone. Benny read it twice. She put the phone in the inside pocket of her jacket, the one with the flap, and she kept her face exactly where it was. A supervisor learned that early. You did not let the corridor see the floor drop out from under you. She did the math the way she did the trays. School was closed for the storm. Her neighbor worked the same overnight she did. Her mother was 3 states away and could barely stand from her chair. There was no name left on the list. The list had one name on it, and it had just canceled. Which left the boy. She keyed her radio. Marisol, you on the floor? A crackle, then a voice with the specific brightness of someone 8 hours into a shift and refusing to slow down. Ward 7. What you need, boss? Meet me at the stairwell. 2 minutes. Ominous, Marisol said. Love it. On my way. The stairwell landing between 6 and 7 was the one place on the floor without a camera and without a patient, and every long-shift veteran in the building used it for exactly the conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else. Marisol Vega arrived chewing the end of a colored pen. Teal scrubs, curls pinned back, a lanyard of ID and keys that jingled when she moved. She took one look at Abeni's face and stopped chewing. Okay, Marisol said. That's the face. Who died? Nobody died. Denise canceled. Her mother fell. On tonight of all, Marisol caught herself. Okay, where's Malachi right now? Across the street with Mrs. Okafor until midnight. That was the deal. Denise picks him up at midnight. Abeni pressed the heel of her hand against her eyebrow. It's 11:44. So he's got no ride and no bed in about 16 minutes. He's got no ride and no bed in about 16 minutes. Marisol didn't waste the moment on sympathy. That was the thing Abeni loved about her, the reason she'd pulled Marisol onto her overnight team in the first place. The woman skipped straight past. Oh no. And landed on, here's what we do. She'd raised a kid alone too, was still raising one, and she knew that when a single mother's night collapsed, she did not need a hug, she needed a plan with a door on it. Bring him here, Marisol said. I can't bring a 6-year-old onto the floor. You can bring him into the family lounge on 7. It's empty all week. There's a couch, there's a door, there's a TV, nobody's watching. I take my breaks on 7 anyway. I keep an eye. You keep working. Nobody upstairs is walking the family lounge at midnight in a flood. Abeni looked at her. If Dorsey finds out, Dorsey's home in bed, like a person with sense. Marisol pointed the pen at her. You have covered for every single one of us, me included. The night my sitter no-showed you drove my kid to my sister's on your own break. You remember that? That was different. It was exactly the same, is what it was. Marisol softened. Just a degree. He's a good kid. He'll sleep. Go get him before Mrs. Okafor's patience runs out. Abeni looked at the stairwell door, at the smear of rain on the wire glass window in it, and did the thing she hated most, which was to weigh her son against her job and find that tonight there was no clean answer, only a least bad one. If a code drops and I'm off the floor, she said, it's my badge on the log. Then don't get caught, boss. Marisol said it gently, without a trace of a smile, because it wasn't a joke. It was the whole ugly truth of the shift in 5 words. Half of what keeps this place alive at night is somebody bending a rule that shouldn't have been theirs to carry in the first place. You taught me that, you just didn't say it out loud. Abeni breathed out slow. The rules said no children on the ward. The rules also said a dietary supervisor was responsible for 140 covered meals a night and could not simply walk off the floor at 11:45. And the rules never once explained how a single mother was supposed to satisfy both of those things at the same time. The rules had been written by people who went home. 20 minutes, Abeni said. I'll be 20 minutes. Take the poncho off the hook by the loading dock. It's biblical out there. It was biblical out there. The river had come up over the low end of the parking lot, and the streetlights doubled themselves in the standing water. Abeni crossed to Mrs. Okafor's building with the poncho hood pulled down and her ID badge tucked inside, and she came back 4 minutes later with 60 pounds of 6-year-old half asleep against her shoulder and a backpack over her free arm. Malachi woke enough to complain on the stairs. It's raining sideways. It is. Denise didn't come. Denise couldn't come tonight, baby. Her mama needs her. He considered that with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could bring to another person's crisis. Is her mama okay? She fell down, but she's got Denise now, so she'll be okay. Where am I gonna sleep? Someplace warm, with me close by the whole time. He accepted it. He always accepted it, and every time he accepted it, a small hook caught somewhere under Abeni's ribs, because a child shouldn't be this practiced at rearranging his own night around his mother's job. He had his father's eyes and none of his father's luck. She pushed that thought back down where she kept it. Mama, he said into her shoulder, half in a dream already, do sick people get scared at night? Sometimes, baby. Is that why you go? So somebody's there. She stopped on the landing. The rain hammered the stairwell window, and the streetlights doubled in the flooded lot below, and her son had, at 6 years old, in one sleepy sentence, said the truest thing anyone had said about her work in 4 years. Yeah, she said, that's why I go. Okay, he said, satisfied, and put his thumb near his mouth the way he only did when he was too tired to remember he'd quit. They came in through the loading dock. She stripped the wet poncho off him, toweled his curls with a clean dish towel from the kitchen stack, and walked him up the back stairs to 7, with his sneakers squeaking on every landing. The family lounge on 7 was exactly as Marisol had promised. One couch, one dark TV, one window streaming with rain, a vending machine humming in the corner like it had somewhere better to be. Abeni laid him out on the couch and pulled a spare blanket from her own locker over him. She set his backpack where he'd see it. She put the pendant on its cord back around his neck where it had slipped loose. The one thing he wore every day and never took off. I have to work, she said. I'm 1 floor down. Marisol is right here on this floor, all night. If you need me, you tell Marisol, and she calls me, and I come running. Fast. What do I do? You come running fast, Malachi said, already going under. Every time. What's the rule? Stay on the couch, he mumbled. Don't wander. Don't wander, she repeated. Say it back to me tomorrow, and I'll buy you the pancakes. He was asleep before she reached the door. She stood there 1 second longer than she should have. She watched his chest rise and fall under the borrowed blanket, and thought about all the nights she'd built her whole existence around exactly this. A place for him to be warm, a person close enough to run to, a promise she could keep. She had never once broken it. Denise broke tonight. Mrs. Okafor broke at midnight. The dietary system broke at 11. Abeni Clark did not break. She rearranged, and she absorbed, and she carried what everyone else set down. Then she went back to work. By 1 in the morning, the storm had knocked out the pharmacy's tube system, and the whole rhythm of the building had to be run by hand. Abeni didn't work pharmacy, but when the tubes went down, everything downstream slowed, and everything downstream included the timing of meals against medication, which meant 3 of her early morning feeds now had to be rescheduled around insulin windows she suddenly had to confirm by phone instead of by screen. She stood at the ward station with the desk phone against her ear and her tablet balanced on the counter and worked 2 systems at once. No, bed 4 is NPO after 2, so if his procedure's still on for 6, he doesn't eat. But if they bumped it for the storm, he needs a tray at 5, or he's going to bottom out. She listened. Then somebody has to tell me by 4, not 4:30, 4. The charge nurse on 6, a tired man named Petrakis, gave her a look that was almost admiration. You know your dietary, right? You could just push the trays. I could. Abeni hung up the phone. And then I'd spend all week filling out reports on why bed 4 seized. Fair. She logged the change. Her hands moved on their own. Somewhere in the back of her attention, a clock ran on the boy upstairs. She'd checked the family lounge twice already. Both times a quick lean through the door to confirm the small shape under the blanket. Both times back down before anyone noticed the supervisor had left her floor. Petrakis leaned toward her, lowering his voice. You hear about upstairs? Upstairs is a lot of floors. 10, the whole east half of 10. He tipped his head toward the ceiling. They sealed it this afternoon. Private security in the elevator lobby, not ours. Badge readers they installed themselves. Dietary's not even running trays up there. Some private outfits handling all of it. That got her attention, because dietary running every tray in the building was the one thing Abeni could say for certain. There were no exceptions to it. Every mouth in St. Catherine ate off a ticket she or her day counterpart signed. "Since when does a wing feed itself?" she said. "Since a man with a lot of money checked in and brought his own everything." Petrakis shrugged. "You didn't hear it from me. 2 of my float nurses got pulled up there this afternoon and reassigned before dinner. Signed something. Won't say a word about it now. Won't even joke about it. And Reyes jokes about everything." "Signed what?" "That's the part. Reyes said it was a whole page. Confidentiality, no phones on the floor, no names spoken in the halls." Petrakis lowered his voice further, though the corridor was empty. "You know what they told her? They told her she'd been selected, like it was a promotion. Then they took her badge and gave her a different one that only works up there." Abeni set the phone down slowly. "A patient doesn't get to pick which of our nurses touch him. A patient doesn't. This one did." Petrakis spread his hands. "Somebody signed off on it above all of us. Way above. Administration lit the whole east half of 10 up like it was a different hospital wearing ours as a coat." She thought about the borrowed nurses in their borrowed badges, forbidden to speak, feeding a man off tickets she'd never see, and the wrongness of it settled deeper. Every mouth in this building ate off a signature. That was the rule that made the building safe. Somebody had carved a hole in it and moved a stranger into the hole. Abeni frowned at the ceiling as if she could see through 10 floors of concrete. "Money buys a lot," she said. "Money bought the 10th floor," Petrakis said. The desk phone rang again and pulled her back into the night, and she let the 10th floor go, because the 10th floor was not her problem, and bed 4 was, and a supervisor who chased other people's mysteries was a supervisor who missed her own trays. At 2, she went up to check on Malachi and found Marisol sitting on the arm of the couch with a juice carton, keeping her promise. "He woke up once," Marisol whispered. "Asked where you were. I said 1 floor down saving the world. He said she does that and went back to sleep." She grinned. "Cool kid, boss. He tell people you save the world?" "He tells people I make sure sick people eat," Abeni whispered back, "which is less exciting and more true. He's got your whole face. Except the eyes." Abeni's hand paused halfway to tucking the blanket. "The eyes are his father's." She didn't say more, and Marisol, who'd worked beside her for 2 years and had learned exactly which doors not to open, didn't ask. "There were things about Abeni Clark you got, and things you didn't, and the boy's father was firmly in the second column." Marisol had built a whole private theory once and then thrown it out, because none of it fit a woman who ran an overnight shift like a field marshal and cried at nothing and flinched, just slightly, whenever the intercom paged a name in Korean. "I got him," Marisol said instead. "Go, your pharmacy thing blew up again. I heard it on the radio." The pharmacy thing had, in fact, blown up again. For the next hour, Abeni ran the seam between food and medicine by hand, floor to floor, phone to phone. She recalculated 2 feeding schedules. She caught a second double-printed ticket and traced it, this time, to a formatting error in the Storm backup system that was going to keep firing duplicates until someone rebooted the whole dietary module, which no one could do until day shift. So she did the only thing left. She printed the master list by hand, walked it, and checked every single ticket against it herself, ward by ward, the way it had been done before any of them were born. It was slow. It was thankless. It was the difference between a safe night and a lawsuit, and she was the only person in the building both willing and positioned to do it. Ward by ward she went. On 5, she caught a tray marked for a woman who'd been discharged at 8 and never cleared from the system. On 6, she caught nothing, which was its own small victory. On 4, she stood over the sleeping man in bed 4 for a moment and confirmed with the night nurse that his procedure had, in fact, been bumped to the afternoon by the storm, which meant he ate at 5 after all, which meant her earlier fight on the phone had been worth every minute. She wrote it on the list in pen. Small wins. A night was made of small wins stacked against small disasters, and you kept score whether anyone thanked you or not. Nobody thanked you. That was fine. Abeni had stopped needing the thanks somewhere in her 2nd year, the way you stopped feeling your feet by the 10th hour. The work was the thing. The boy upstairs was the thing. Everything else was weather. Around 3, she leaned against the wall outside the Ward 6 kitchen and let herself feel, for 4 seconds this time, exactly how tired she was. 29 years old. 9 years in food service, 4 of them here, 2 as a supervisor. A studio apartment she kept immaculate and could barely afford. A son who thought pancakes were a reward worth staying good for. A phone with 1 canceled sitter and no backups. A body that had stopped reporting pain hours ago because pain was a luxury the shift didn't have room for. Copper coat still on the hook at home she hadn't worn in a month. A plum knit dress in the closet she kept for a life she didn't have time to live. She was 29 and she dressed for work and for sleep, and almost never for anything in between. She thought about the 10th floor without wanting to. A man with a lot of money and his own everything. Sealed doors and borrowed nurses who wouldn't joke anymore. It sat wrong with her, the way a double-printed ticket sat wrong. A small thing off in a system she trusted. A sign that somewhere the machine was feeding somebody the wrong plate. Not my floor, she told herself. Not my problem. But the intercom had paged a name in Korean twice that night. Routine, a visiting physician, nothing. And both times something in her had gone still and cold for half a second before she made it move again. She hated that it still did that. 7 years, and a single language could reach into her chest and squeeze without warning. She'd trained herself out of 1,000 things. That one wouldn't go. She pushed off the wall. At 3:40, the master list walk brought her back up to 7, and she checked the lounge on the way past. Malachi had turned in his sleep and thrown one arm off the couch, the pendant fallen against the cushion. She fixed the blanket. She stood over him for a moment in the vending machine light and let herself have the thing she never had time for during the shift. Just looking at him. The curls. The soft round face going long already at 6. The eyes she couldn't look at too long without the past coming up in her throat. 7 years. It had been 7 years since the coast. Since the phone call. Since the word. Drowned. Went into her ear and never quite left. 7 years of building a life around a hole and teaching herself not to look into it. She had gotten very good at not looking. Boss. Marisol's whisper came from the doorway, and something in it made Abeni turn fast. You busy? Always. Why? Marisol had her tablet in her hand and a strange, careful expression on her face. The expression of someone who'd found a thing she wasn't sure she was allowed to have found. Your master list, she said. You've been walking every ticket by hand, right? Because the system's double firing. Right. So the system flagged something to me because I'm covering floats tonight, and I almost ignored it. But your whole night's been about tickets that shouldn't exist, so... Marisol turned the tablet around. There's a family meal order. High priority. Came through the private outfit, but it kicked back into our system because there are things down in the storm too. It needs a dietary signature to release, and the only supervisor on tonight is you. Abeni looked at the screen. A family meal for the 10th floor, Marisol said quietly. The sealed wing. They need you to verify and sign it. In person. Up there. The rain hit the window in a long gray sheet, and the 10th floor stopped being someone else's problem. Abeni looked at the sleeping shape of her son, and then at the tablet, and then at the ceiling, as if this time she really could see through 10 floors of concrete to whatever was waiting on the other side of those sealed doors. Watch him, she said. With my life, said Marisol. Abeni, you okay? You went gray. I'm fine. She wasn't. She took the tablet and read the ticket header again, and the top line of it was a name, and the name was the kind she'd trained herself for 7 years not to flinch at, and her thumb hovered over it without touching. Which elevator? The one they don't let us use. Marisol tilted her head. You don't have to be the one. I can radio Petrakis, make him find somebody with clearance. There is nobody else with clearance. I'm the signature. Abeni pulled the wet strands of hair back off her face and squared the badge on her chest, the small ritual she did before every hard thing. Stay with my son. Don't leave that couch. She stepped into the corridor before Marisol could answer, and the elevator at the end, the private one, the borrowed one, the one wearing the hospital like a coat, opened for her badge on the first try, which it should not have, which meant somebody upstairs had already added her. They'd been expecting the signature. They just hadn't known whose hand it would be on. The doors parted on a corridor that did not belong to the hospital Abeni knew. No linoleum shine, no chart racks bolted to the wall, no smell of bleach fighting a losing war against sickness. Carpet here. A runner the color of ash, thick enough to swallow the sound of her shoes. She stepped out, and the elevator sealed behind her with a hush. Two men stood at the far end. Dark suits, earpieces, hands folded low. One of them lifted his chin at her badge without asking her to show it. He already knew it would open the elevator. Someone had made sure of that. Dietary, Abeni said. She held up the tablet. There's a signature the system won't clear without me. The nearer man looked at the screen for the length of a breath, then he turned and walked, expecting her to follow. She followed. The east wing had been gutted and rebuilt in a night. Partitions closed off the nurses' station she remembered from a training rotation 2 years back. A folding table held stacked linens that were not hospital linens. Too fine, too white, no laundry stamp. A catering cart sat against the wall, steel, unmarked, its wheels locked. Not hers, not the hospital's. Someone else's food, someone else's chain of custody, and yet the ticket had bounced into her system when the storm knocked the pharmacy tubes loose, and now it wanted a hospital supervisor's name on it, before anything moved. She kept her eyes down and her thumb ready. Read the header, sign, leave. Get back to Malachi before he woke and found the couch empty. That was the whole of the plan she'd carried into the elevator, and it was a good plan, the kind she was good at. A supervisor's plan built of small, clean steps. She held it in front of her like a tray. The cart against the wall drew her eye once more as she passed it. Steel, unmarked, wheels locked, and on the lower shelf a stack of meal covers that matched the one on the tray inside the room she hadn't entered yet. A family meal, the ticket said. She counted the covers out of habit. There was only one. A second guard tracked her from the folded-down nurses' station, chin low, eyes level. Neither of them wore a hospital badge. The lanyards at their collars were plain black, no photo, no logo, the kind you order in bulk when you don't want a name attached to a face. Abeni counted them the way she counted trays on a cart. 2 here, 1 at the elevator, however many the storm had pulled off their posts. She filed it without knowing why she was filing it, the way she checked exits in every room, out of a habit older than this job. The man stopped outside a door with a keypad, where a room number should have been. He punched a code with his body angled to hide his hand. The lock gave. He pushed the door in a few inches and stepped aside, and for the first time he spoke. Verify, don't touch anything. Abeni went in. The door settled shut behind her on a spring, cutting the corridor light to a seam and then to nothing. The room was dim. A single lamp burned low in the corner, and past it the shapes resolved slowly, the way a photograph comes up in a tray. A monitor stack against the wall, its lines drawn in green and amber. A ventilator, breathing for someone in a rhythm too even to be a person's own. Bags on a pole. A tray table pushed to one side, and on it a meal under a cloth she was meant to sign for. A family meal, the ticket had said, high priority, though there was only one bed in the room and one body in the bed. She lifted the tablet to catch the light and read the header at last. Slowly. The way you read a word in a language you used to know. Patient. Kang, Min Jae. She had seen the name once already tonight, in the ticket that made her hesitate at the bottom of the elevator shaft. She had told herself it was a common enough name. There were men called Kang the way there were men called Smith. She had told herself a great many things in the last hour, all of them designed to keep her feet moving and her hands steady, and standing in the doorway now, she understood that she had been lying to herself with real skill, because her whole body had known before her mind agreed to it. She looked at the bed. The gown was pale and loose at the shoulder. The head was turned a quarter toward the window, jaw slack under the tape that held the tube. 7 years is a long time. It thins a face, or it fills one out. It should have made a stranger of anyone. It had not. She knew the line of that jaw. She had traced it once with her thumb in a rented room above a laundry, laughing at something neither of them would remember by morning. She knew the cheekbone the lamp was catching now. There was a way he used to sleep, on his back, one arm flung wide, chin tipped to the window, as if he were listening for something in the street. He was lying like that now. A machine had arranged him in the posture he used to fall into on his own. Her knees registered it before the rest of her did. A small give, a hand finding the edge of the tray table without her asking it to. She locked them and stayed upright. And when her eyes went to the side of his neck, to the place where the gown had slipped and the collar had folded down, she stopped being able to hear the ventilator at all. The dragon. Black ink, running up the left side of the throat, its tail vanishing under the fabric and its head lifting toward the ear, as if it were climbing out of him. She had watched a needle put part of that line into his skin, in a shop that smelled of green soap. She had held his hand while a stranger with steady wrists finished the curve of the jaw. He had told her the dragon meant nothing, just a thing men wore where he came from, and she had known even then that it meant everything, and that he would never say so. 7 years. She had done the arithmetic on this man so many times it ran on its own now. 7 years since the letter. 6 years and some months since a nurse laid a boy on her chest, and she looked into a face that already had these eyes. She had built a whole life in the space this man was supposed to have vacated. Rent paid on time. A pantry stocked. A child who slept through storms because his mother had taught him the building would hold. And the man the life was built around the absence of was here, on the 10th floor, 4 blocks from a river, breathing borrowed air. The tablet was still in her hand, the cursor still blinked in the signature field. She did not sign. She took one step into the room, and then another, and the man in the doorway said something behind her that reached her as noise. The word, "Don't," was in it. She kept walking. Up close, the machines were louder, and the man was quieter. The rise and fall of his chest was the ventilator's idea, not his. An IV line ran into the back of one hand, and that hand lay open on the blanket, fingers half curled, still. There was gray at his temple that had not been there. A fresh scar hooked pale above one eyebrow. Under the tape and the tube and the 7 years, it was him. It was the man a lawyer's letter had described as lost at sea, presumed drowned. In language so smooth she had read it 4 times looking for the seam. Benny set the tablet down on the tray table, next to the meal she had come to sign for and had already forgotten. "Ma'am." The guard had come in after her. He was closer now, one hand out, not touching her yet. "You need to step back from the patient." "What's his condition?" Her voice came out level. It surprised her. "That's not... I supervise nutrition for a patient I'm being asked to sign off on." She did not turn around. "I read the chart or I don't sign. Those are the rules downstairs. I don't know what your rules are up here." That bought her 3 seconds. It was enough. Her eyes had already found the clipboard hung at the foot of the bed. A paper chart, old-fashioned, the kind you kept when you wanted a record kept off every network in the building. She leaned and read it upside down, the way she had learned to read tickets over a cook's shoulder. Most of it was in a shorthand she half knew. Sedation, ventilator settings, a neurology consult requested and, in a different hand, denied, and at the bottom, in block letters that someone had underlined twice, a line that stopped her breath a second time in as many minutes. Withdrawal of support authorized. Effective tonight. A single meal cover on a cart. One place set for a family gathering. She understood the arithmetic of the room now, the way she understood a duplicated tray on Ward 6. A small wrong number that pointed at a large wrong thing. The family was not coming to eat with him. The tray was staged for a chart, so a paper somewhere could say a loved one shared a last meal at his bedside. No one was going to sit down. No one was going to eat. She read it again to be sure the storm hadn't scrambled it the way it had scrambled the pharmacy tubes. It hadn't. Someone had signed a man's life away and dated it for the same night the flood had thrown open a door that was supposed to stay shut. Tonight. The meal on the tray was not a meal. It was a formality. A family gathers, a family eats, a family says goodbye, and in the morning the machines are wheeled out and a second death certificate joins the first one, and this time there would be a body to bury, and no one downstairs would ever know that the man in the sealed room had a name she had once whispered in the dark. "Who authorized this?" she said. The guard's patience ran out. "That's enough. You've verified the tray. Sign and go." "Who authorized withdrawal of support?" "Family." The word was flat. "It's a family decision." "It's done. Sign the tray." "Family." She almost laughed, and the sound that came instead was worse. She knew exactly how much family this man had, because he had told her, in the room above the laundry, in the low, even voice he used for the things that cost him. A mother, a cousin, a name that opened doors and closed coffins. He had said it the way another man might describe weather he could not change. Abeni looked back at the bed, at the open hand. She should sign. Every rule she had built her life on said sign the tray, walk to the elevator, ride down to the floor where her son slept, and her job made sense. And a supervisor of nutrition did not touch patients she had no orders for. The badge on her chest was the badge of a woman who followed procedure through a flood. That woman signed the tray. She reached out and put her hand over his. It was warm. That was the thing that undid her. Not the face, not the dragon, not the line underlined twice at the foot of the chart. The warmth. She had spent 7 years teaching herself that his hands were cold now, wherever they were, cold and gone and past all reaching. And here, under her palm, the skin was warm, and the pulse in the wrist was slow and stubborn and real. A machine was moving his chest, but the heat in him was his own. Her fingers closed. His did not. But the warmth stayed, and she stood there holding a dead man's living hand while a stranger told her to step back, and something in her chest that had been packed in ice for 7 years cracked straight down the middle. She had rehearsed grief. She had gotten good at it. There was a version of her that had stood at a rail over gray water because a letter said that was where he ended, and had thrown nothing in, because she had nothing of his but a boy, and she was not throwing the boy into anything. She had learned to say, "His father passed," in a voice flat enough to close the subject. She had earned that flatness, and it deserted her now, all at once, at the pad of her thumb against a knuckle she had kissed. And what came up in its place was not grief at all. It was closer to fury. Someone had made her mourn a man who was warm. "Ma'am." The guard's voice had changed, not softer, sharper. He had seen her face, and whatever was on it was not the face of a dietary supervisor confirming a tray. "Take your hand off the patient." "His hand is warm," she said, and understood as she said it that she was not talking to the guard. "He's on life support, of course he's warm. Step back. You're going to turn off the machines tonight." A pause. In the pause, she heard the ventilator again, patient and mechanical, pushing air into a man they had already decided was finished. She heard her own blood. She heard, very far below, the storm still working at the building. "That's not your business," the guard said. "Sign the tray or leave. You don't get to do both." Abeni kept her hand where it was. She looked at the face on the pillow, the slack jaw, the scar that was new to her, the gray that had come while she grieved, and she spoke to it in a voice pitched under the machines, meant for no one in the room who was awake. "You were dead," she said. "They told me you drowned. I read the letter. I made myself believe the letter." Her thumb moved once across his knuckles, the way it had in the tattoo shop, the way it had 100 nights since, only in dreams she woke from angry. "You've been up here breathing this whole time." The hand under hers stayed still. The monitor kept its count, but she was watching his face when she said the last of it, and later she would not be able to swear to anyone what she saw, only that she saw it. A flicker at the corner of the eye, small as a moth, gone before she could name it. A twitch under the lid. The kind of thing a doctor writes off as reflex and a mother remembers for the rest of her life. She looked at the monitor then, because a part of her that had worked around medicine for 4 years needed a number to argue with. The heart rate sat low and steady, but under her hand, in the second after she spoke his name, the number climbed. 4 beats. 5. Then it settled back, the way a stone settles after you drop it in still water. A doctor would call it nothing, a machine responding to a machine. She had watched too many trays cool to believe in nothing. "That did something," she said. His rate went up. "It does that." The guard hadn't looked at the monitor. He was watching her hands. "It's automatic. You've been in here 9 days and you know what's automatic?" He had no answer for that, and the silence told her he had been in here longer than 9 days and had learned to keep his eyes off the man in the bed, the way you keep your eyes off a thing you have been told is already finished. She leaned closer, close enough that her voice would carry no farther than the pillow. "Minjae." Behind her, the guard said something into his sleeve, low, 2 words she didn't catch, and the quality of the room changed the way air changes before lightning. He wasn't managing a dietary worker anymore. He was reporting one. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. There's a child down on 7 with your patient's eyes." She said it without deciding to. It came up out of her like water finding a crack. 6 years old, same eyes. I've spent 6 years telling myself they were his father's eyes, and his father was gone. Her hand tightened over the warm one. You don't get to turn off the machines tonight. The guard's grip closed on her upper arm. Not rough, precise. The grip of a man who had moved people who did not want to be moved and knew exactly how much force it took. Let go of the patient, he said. She let go. She had to. But before her fingers left his, she pressed once, on the inside of the wrist, over the slow pulse, a pressure she used to mean, I'm here. In a language that had never needed words. It was a stupid thing to do. He was sedated past the reach of any signal. She did it anyway, and it was the first promise she had made to him in 7 years, and she meant to keep this one better than the world had kept its promises to her. Then she straightened, slowly, and she kept her eyes on the bed as the guard's hand came off her arm long enough to reach for the tablet on the tray. The signature field still blinked. He was going to have her sign now, out of procedure or spite, so the paper would say a hospital supervisor had verified the room before it was cleared. Abeni took the tablet. She looked at the empty field where her name was supposed to go. Then she reached past it, to the top of the screen, to the header with the patient's name and the order type, and she pressed and held until the ticket detail expanded. The routing, the timestamps, the account it had bounced through when the storm broke the tube system. She had 30 seconds of a man reaching to take the tablet back before he understood she wasn't signing at all. She was reading, and she used every one of them. The order had not come from the family. It had come from a scheduling account she had seen exactly once before, 6 weeks ago, on a memo about the sealed wing. The account that had provisioned the private badges and the private cart, and the 2 float nurses who had signed confidentiality forms and stopped speaking. And the withdrawal authorization was flagged to the same account, not a doctor's, not a next of kin's, a logistics account, the kind that ordered linens and locked wheels, signing off on a man's death as if it were a delivery. There was a timestamp on the withdrawal flag. She read it twice to be certain. It had been entered 9 days ago. 9 days ago, someone had decided this man would die tonight, and had put it in a system, and then had waited for a night the whole hospital would be too busy drowning to look up. The storm hadn't opened the door by accident. The storm had been the plan's own weather, and the plan had only slipped because a broken tube had bounced one ticket down to a floor where it was never meant to be seen. You logged it 9 days ago, she said. You picked the night. I don't log anything. The guard's voice stayed even, but his eyes went once, fast, to the door, and she understood that whatever he was low enough on this to be frightened of the same people she was about to meet. Her mind was already 3 moves down a corridor she didn't have a map for. Staying in this room was closed to her. Signing this tray was closed to her, and riding the elevator down to let the machines go dark at whatever hour the plan had set was the one road she would burn before she took it. Because somewhere below her, a boy was sleeping who would spend his life the way she had spent the last 7 years, saying, "Past." In a flat voice, if she let this room finish its work tonight, she needed a doctor, a real one, whose name was not a linen account. She needed the withdrawal stopped before dawn, and she needed a record that could not be deleted by whoever had typed it in 9 days ago. That's the last time I'm going to ask. The guard took the tablet out of her hands. This time he was not gentle about it. He has a next of kin, Abeni said. A mother. You put her name on a withdrawal order? The guard didn't answer, but something crossed his face, fast, and she knew the guess had landed somewhere near the truth. The order hadn't been signed by the mother. The order had been signed by whoever wanted it to look like the mother. You know it too, Abeni said, quiet. That's why you don't look at him. You've been standing outside a room where somebody's killing a man on paper, and you know the paper's a lie. I stand where I'm posted. He said it fast, like a man who had said it to himself more than once. He reached for the door handle to move her toward it. Come on. She let him turn her. She kept her arm loose in his grip. Fighting the hand would end with her in a stairwell, and the machines going dark on schedule. So she went where he steered, a half step, 2, close enough to the door that she felt the cooler air of the corridor find the seam. And then the door opened from the other side before he could reach the handle, and someone stood in the frame. Before Abeni's eyes had finished with her, the voice came, low and even, and edged in an accent that put the hair up on her arms, because she had heard that cadence before, in another mouth, in the room above the laundry, in the 2 words this man used to say for My family. When he meant, the thing I cannot escape. Why is there a hospital badge in this room? But she kept her body between the woman in the doorway and the bed, and she kept the warmth of his hand alive in her own palm, where she could still feel it. And when she opened her mouth, she found that the ice in her chest had finished breaking and left something harder underneath. Your patient is alive, Abeni said, and somebody scheduled him to die tonight on a linen account. The ventilator breathed. The storm worked the walls. And in the bed between the two women, the man they had both believed different things about lay warm and still and breathing on a machine, while downstairs, 6 floors down, a boy with his eyes turned over in his sleep on a couch he'd been told not to leave. The woman in the doorway did not raise her voice. That was the first thing Abeni understood about her. People who raised their voices were asking to be heard. This woman assumed she already had been. Step away from the bed. Abeni held her ground between the mattress and the door. Her hip pressed the rail. Behind her, the machine kept its slow work, and she matched her own breathing to it without deciding to. I asked you a question, the woman said. Why is there a hospital badge in this room? Because a hospital admitted him, Abeni said. 4 days ago. I can pull the record. Something moved across the woman's face and was gone before it finished. Not surprise. Recognition. Her eyes went from the badge clipped at Abeni's chest up to Abeni's face, and they stopped there, and stayed. The guard by the elevator shifted his weight. He'd caught it too. Take off the badge, the woman said. Hand it to him. No. The word landed in the carpeted quiet like a dropped tray. The guard near the bed straightened. The woman's chin lifted a fraction of an inch, the exact amount a person lifts it when they have decided the conversation is beneath them and will now be ended. You don't know who I am, the woman said. I'm starting to. Abeni had spent 7 years imagining a mother. Min-jae had built her in fragments. A hand that never approved. A house with too many rules. A name he lowered his voice to say. She'd pictured someone loud. She'd been wrong about the loud. Everything else fit. The stillness. The way the woman's hands stayed folded at her waist while 2 men waited on her breath. You're his mother, Abeni said. The woman stepped fully into the room. Her heels made no sound on the carpet they'd rolled over hospital tile. She came to the foot of the bed and looked down at her son the way a person looks at a document, checking it was the one they'd signed. Then she looked up again, and her eyes found Abeni's face a second time, and this time she let herself see it. You, she said, quiet, almost to herself. You're the girl. Abeni's stomach dropped through the floor. Not the woman she once was. Not a stranger being placed. The girl. The article said everything. It said this woman had been told about her. Had heard her described, maybe seen a photograph, had filed her under a word and closed the drawer. 7 years ago, when a letter arrived saying Kang Min-jae had drowned, someone on the other side of the ocean had already known there was a girl who would need to believe it. You knew about me, Abeni said. I know a great many things. You knew my name. I know your name is not the concern in this room. But she'd hesitated. Half a second, the space between one word and the next, and in it, Abeni saw the whole shape of the thing. This woman had not been surprised to hear a hospital had admitted her son. She had not been surprised by the badge. The only thing that had moved her face was Abeni herself, the girl, standing in a room she was never supposed to reach, on a night that had been chosen 9 days ago. You told him I was gone, Abeni said. Her voice came out level and she didn't know how. You told me he was gone. You told us both the same lie, and you told it in 2 directions. The woman turned to the guard by the bed. Remove her. The guard didn't move at once. He looked at Abeni, then at the man in the bed, then at the paper chart hanging from its rail, with the words underlined twice, and something in his jaw worked. Now, the woman said. He crossed the room. He crossed the room. He was careful about it, a big man made careful by a small one, by the fact that the small one had a badge, and the badge belonged to a building with cameras and administrators, and a night charge nurse who'd logged her leaving the 6th floor. He took Abeni's arm above the elbow. Not hard. A grip that said this is happening, not I am hurting you. You touched a sedated patient, the woman said. You entered a restricted floor. You refused a lawful instruction from the family. Every one of those is enough. Lawful, Benny said. You keep saying family like it's a court. In this family it is. The guard drew her toward the door. Benny let him move her a step, 2 steps, because the paper chart had taught her something in the last 20 minutes. The people who ran this room were terrified of anything written down. She'd been dragged out of nicer places for less. If she fought, she ended in the stairwell with a torn jacket and a story nobody would take. If she walked, she kept the badge, and the badge kept the record. But at the door she stopped, and the guard let her, because she'd set it low enough that only the room could hear. There's a consult on that chart, Benny said. Neurology. Requested. Denied. In a different hand than the one that wrote the orders. She looked at the woman. Whose hand denied it? The woman's folded hands did not move. But her thumb pressed the back of her other hand, once, and Benny saw it. He's not gone, Benny said. You'd know that if you let a doctor in the room. That's why you didn't. For a moment, nobody in the room moved. The machine breathed. The storm leaned on the window. And the woman looked at Benny with an attention she hadn't given her yet. Not the glance you give staff, but the long, weighing look you give a problem that has grown a size larger than you planned for. You think you found something, the woman said. A girl who carries trays found a secret. A small motion of her mouth that was not a smile. You found a family managing a private grief in private, nothing more. And you will not speak of it, because no one you tell will believe a night worker over the Kang name, and because I will make the cost of speaking of it more than your life can carry. My life, Benny said, is a boy on the 6th floor. The woman went still, in a new way. She hadn't known that. Whatever file she'd closed 7 years ago, whatever the word girl had meant to her, it had not contained a boy. Benny saw the information land, saw the woman recalculate behind a face built to give nothing, and understood, half a second too late, that she'd just handed a dangerous person the one fact she should have guarded with her teeth. Take her downstairs, the woman said again, and this time the order came fast. There was something under the calm now, a hairline crack in the porcelain. Hold her badge. If she comes back to this floor she is trespassing, and you will call the police, not me. The guard's grip tightened. He walked her out. The corridor swallowed them, the carpet, the folding table, the steel cart with its single meal lid that no one would ever lift. Benny counted doors as they passed. 3 on the left, 2 on the right. A supply alcove with a chair pulled into it, and a paperback face down on the seat, someone's long shift. She cataloged it all the way you catalog a floor. You planned to know better than the people who sealed it. At the elevator the second guard was waiting. He pressed his thumb to a reader that hadn't been there a week ago. The doors opened on the same private car that had known Benny's badge before she showed it. 6th floor, her guard said. She works nights, she doesn't come back up. I heard her, the elevator guard said. They put her in the car. Her guard stepped in with her, and the doors closed, and the 2 of them dropped through the building in a box the size of a closet, and for 4 floors, neither of them spoke. Then, at the 6th, before the doors opened, the guard let go of her arm. The consult, he said, low, fast, not looking at her. You saw the 2 hands on the chart. Benny went still. I didn't tell you anything, he said. I walked you down. The doors opened on the 6th floor. Real tile, real fluorescent hum, a med cart, a nurse charting at the station who glanced up and back down. The guard stepped aside. Benny walked out onto her own floor, and the doors closed behind her, and she stood a moment with her back to the wall and her pulse going in her ears. 2 hands on the chart, a guard who was afraid, and a guard who wanted her to know he was afraid. She didn't go to the station. She turned down the corridor toward the service stairs, toward Ward 7 and the family room, and the boy she'd left on a couch with a rule. 6 floors below the sealed room, at roughly the same minute Yoon-suk was telling a guard to hold a badge, Malachi Clark woke up. He woke the way small children wake in strange places. All at once, eyes open, the body already deciding whether to be afraid. The couch was not his bed. The blanket smelled like the hospital, which smelled like his mother when she came home. So that part was all right. But the room was wrong. The light was wrong. There was a television bolted high in the corner, dark, and a water cooler that ticked, and a stack of magazines fanned on a low table, and no mama. He sat up. The pendant on its cord had twisted around while he slept, and he turned it right without thinking, the way he'd been taught, the small weight of it settling back against his chest. "Mama," he said, to the room, not loud. A question to see if the word would bring her. It didn't. He remembered the rule. Stay on the couch. Don't wander. She'd said it twice and made him say it back once, which was how he knew it was a real rule and not a soft one. He lay back down. He looked at the ceiling. He counted the little holes in one of the ceiling tiles the way he counted things when he was supposed to be sleeping, and got to 12, and lost it, and started again. The door to the family room was propped with a rubber wedge. Through the gap he could see a slice of corridor, and a woman in teal cross it once, quick, carrying something, and not look in. That was Marisol. He knew Marisol. Marisol had given him a juice earlier and shown him the badge that made doors beep. If Marisol was out there, then it was almost like Mama was out there, and the rule was for when nobody was watching, and somebody was watching, sort of. He got off the couch. He told himself he was only going to the door. Just to the door, to look, and that wasn't wandering, that was looking. He padded across the room in his socks. His sneakers were lined up by the couch where Mama had set them, laces tucked in, and he put his hand on the door and leaned his face into the gap. The corridor was long and shiny and empty. Marisol was gone the other way. Far down, a cart stood against the wall with a blanket half falling off it, and past the cart a set of doors, and past the doors a wall with pictures on it. Malachi looked at the pictures for a while from the doorway. He couldn't see them, not really. They were too far, just shapes and frames. But grown-ups put pictures on walls, and pictures had people in them, and one of the things Malachi did, one of the private things, was look at people in pictures and decide if they looked like anybody. He had a picture at home. It lived in the drawer of Mama's nightstand under a folded scarf, and he wasn't supposed to know it was there, and he did. A man with a strong face and hair that fell over his forehead, and eyes that Malachi sometimes checked against his own in the bathroom mirror, standing on his stool, turning his face side to side. Mama had never said the man's name. Mama got quiet in a certain way about the drawer, so Malachi had learned to look at the picture only when the house was empty and to put the scarf back exactly folded. He stepped into the corridor. He knew, doing it, that it was the rule breaking. He felt it in his stomach, the little hot feeling, but the corridor was so quiet and so bright and nobody was in it, and he was only going to look at the pictures, and then he would come right back and be on the couch before Marisol crossed again, and it would be like he never left. He walked past the cart with the blanket. He walked to the wall of pictures, and they were nothing. Buildings, a bridge, flowers, a doctor shaking a hand. No one who looked like anybody. He almost turned around then. If he had turned around then, none of it. But there was a door at the end that wasn't shut, and beyond it a stairwell, cool and gray, and a stairwell was a thing Malachi understood better than an elevator, because at his building, the elevator was broken, and they always took the stairs. Stairs went to other floors. Mama worked on the floors. If he went up one floor, quiet, and looked, maybe he would cross the shiny hall and see the sage-green jacket, and it would be her, and she would carry him back and he wouldn't even be in trouble because he'd found her instead of wandering. That was the logic of a 6-year-old at 4 in the morning. It made a clean kind of sense from the inside. Grown-ups worked upstairs. Mama was a grown-up. Upstairs was where you found her. He would go up and be helpful, and it would erase the part where he'd left the couch, and Mama would laugh the laugh she did when she was actually scared, the one that came out shaped like relief, and carry him down against her hip with his face in her neck. He held the cold rail and started to climb. He went into the stairwell. The door sighed shut behind him with a sound that made him jump, and then it was just him and the cold steps and the numbers painted on the wall. He went up. One flight. A door with a small window too high to see through. He kept going, because one floor hadn't been her, and the next one might. He didn't count the flights. Later that would matter. That no one could say how he got so high so fast, a small boy in socks climbing through a building at night, while every adult who should have stopped him was busy with a sealed door. He climbed until his legs told him it was a lot, and he came out through a door because his legs asked him to, and he was somewhere new. This floor was different. It had carpet. Malachi noticed the carpet with his socks first, soft after the cold steel, and then he noticed the quiet was a thicker quiet, and then he noticed the man in the dark suit sitting in a chair pulled into an alcove, chin down, a paperback face down on the seat beside him, asleep, the way people fall asleep at the wrong hour of a long night. Malachi held very still. He'd learned to hold still around sleeping grown-ups. He went past the alcove on his socks, silent, and the man in the chair breathed and didn't wake, and Malachi was in a corridor with a folding table and a steel cart and a row of doors, and on the wall, where the corridor turned, hung a single framed thing the private floor had put up to look like the private floors these people were used to. And it wasn't a face, it was nothing, but by then, Malachi had stopped looking for pictures. Because one of the doors was open a hand's width, and through the gap there was a light that breathed. A soft green light, going up and going down, the way the machine went, though he didn't know a machine made it. To a boy it looked like the room itself was breathing, slow, and Malachi had asked his mother once whether sick people got scared at night, and she'd said something that let him sleep, and now here was a room breathing in the dark, and he was not scared, he was pulled. He put his hand on the door. He should have been caught a dozen times by now. A guard slept. A mother stood at a foot of a bed 1 floor's turn away, giving an order into a phone. A machine breathed for a man. And a small boy pushed a heavy door with the flat of his hand, and it swung on a slow hinge, and he stepped into a room where a person lay in a bed, with a tube at his mouth, and a light climbing a screen. Malachi stopped just inside. He looked at the man in the bed for a long time. The tube, the wires, the blanket squared across the chest. The face turned toward the window, jaw and cheekbone lit gray-green by the screen, dark hair fallen over the forehead the way it fell in the picture in the drawer, under the scarf that he wasn't supposed to know about. Malachi's hand went to the pendant at his chest and closed around it. He had checked this face in a bathroom mirror on a stool. He had turned his own head side to see. He knew the eyes were closed, and he still knew the eyes. Down the left side of the man's neck, above the edge of the pale gown, a dark mark curled up toward the ear. Malachi didn't have a word for a dragon on skin. He thought it was a drawing, and he thought, in the simple grammar of a child who had studied one photograph his whole small life, that the drawing had been on the man in the picture too, at the collar, half hidden. "You're the man," Malachi whispered. The machine breathed, the light climbed. He took a step closer, then another. The floor here was carpet and made no sound, and nothing stopped him, and he came to the side of the high bed and had to look up at the still face and the fallen hair, and he did not think father, not yet, because his mother had never given him the word. He thought, the man from the drawer. The one she gets quiet about, the one with my eyes. Behind him, in the corridor, a door opened and quick soft steps came, and a woman's voice, low and coming apart at its edges, said his name. Malachi. He turned. His mother was in the doorway. She'd come up the service stairs 2 at a time, with her badge already useless in her fist, come to the family room to find a wedged door and an empty couch and a blanket thrown back, come out into the corridor calling for Marisol, and Marisol white-faced pointing at the propped stairwell door, and Abeni had gone up the same cold steps her son had climbed, guessing wrong twice, opening onto the wrong floors, until she came out onto carpet where she was forbidden to be, and saw a stairwell door easing shut, and a sleeping guard, and, past him, the width of an open door and a small shape inside it, in the breathing green light. Now she stood in the doorway of the room she'd been dragged out of 20 minutes ago, and her son stood at the bedside of the man she'd buried in her chest for 7 years, and the 2 faces turned toward her wore the same eyes. "Baby," Abeni said, "you can't be up here." But she didn't move to grab him. She couldn't. Her feet had stopped at the threshold, and her whole body had gone to the 2 of them, the small one looking up and the still one lying down, close enough now that the resemblance wasn't a thing she could argue with anymore, wasn't a thing she'd been carrying alone in a nightstand drawer. It was in the room, in the light, 6 years old and 31 years old, and she was the only person alive who could see both at once. "Mama," Malachi whispered. He didn't look away from the bed. "It's the man. From your drawer." Abeni came into the room. She should have been thinking about the guard in the chair, the mother with the phone, the police the woman had promised to call. She'd think about all of it in a minute. Right now she crossed the carpet and got down on her knees beside her son so their heads were level, and she put one arm around his back, and she looked with him at the face on the pillow, the jaw, The fallen hair, the dark curl of ink above the collar that a machine's light kept touching and letting go. Malachi's hand was still closed around the pendant. His other hand had come up and rested on the bed rail, small fingers over the cold metal, close to the still hand that lay open on the blanket but not touching it, not yet, waiting the way children wait when they've found something too big to be sure of. "Is he sleeping?" Malachi asked. "He's very sick," Abeni said. Her voice had almost nothing left in it. "Machines are helping him breathe. Is he going to wake up?" She didn't answer that. She couldn't answer that. She'd read the chart. She'd read the word, underlined twice. She'd read a mother's thumb press once against the back of her own hand. Malachi turned his head and looked at his mother, and the question in his face was older than 6, because children always know the shape of the thing the adults are stepping around even when they don't know its name, and he had spent his whole life stepping around the drawer. "Mama," he said, "who is he?" And Abeni, who had told a boy his father drowned before he was born, who had folded that story into a scarf and a drawer and a certain kind of quiet, who had built a life 4 blocks from a river on the foundation of a word that turned out to be a lie someone chose to tell in 2 directions, knelt on the carpet of a room she'd been forbidden to enter. With her arm around her son and the machine breathing between them, and the man on the pillow warm and still and closer than he had been in 7 years, and she made the only choice left that was hers to make. She thought about lying. The lie was right there, worn smooth from years of use. A friend, someone from before, a man Mama used to know. It would have kept the drawer closed one more night. It would have let her carry him downstairs and put him back on the couch and deal with the woman and the guards and the ruin coming for her job in the daylight, alone, the way she'd carried everything alone for 7 years. But the boy had climbed a building in his socks to stand at this bed. The boy had known the face without being told. Whatever protection the lie had ever offered, it had just been spent, because the truth was lying on a pillow in front of him, with his own eyes closed, breathing on a machine, warm, and Abeni was done, all the way down to the floor of herself, telling this child a story about a river. She turned Malachi gently by the shoulder so he faced the bed. She put her hand over his small hand on the rail. "Baby," she said, "this is your father." Malachi didn't ask another question. He looked at the hand on the rail, the fingers open and still, and he did the thing children do when a truth is too big for words. He reached for it. Abeni almost stopped him. Her own hand twitched toward his wrist. Then she let it fall. His small fingers slid into the space between the man's fingers. They fit. Of course they fit. He'd fit his hand into the shape of a stranger from a drawer 100 times in the dark, and now the stranger was warm. "Dad?" Malachi said. He said it plain, no test in it. He'd waited 6 years to have somewhere to put the word, and he set it down like it had always belonged there. For a breath, nothing happened. The monitor kept its green rhythm. The ventilator pushed and pulled. Abeni watched her son's face, not the bed, because watching the bed had cost her 7 years and she couldn't spend more. Then Malachi's hand jumped. He pulled it back an inch, eyes wide. "Mama." His whisper cracked. He squeezed. She looked. The man's fingers had closed, not all the way. 2 of them, curled over the boy's knuckles, holding. Abeni stopped breathing. "Do it again," she said. Her voice came out low and even, the voice she used when a tray had to be right the first time. "Baby, put your hand back. Slow." Malachi looked at her to make sure. She nodded. He slid his hand back into the man's palm. "Ask him," she said. "Dad?" The boy leaned in. "Can you squeeze my hand?" 3 seconds. 4. The fingers moved. They tightened over the small hand and held and let go. One clean press, answered on command. A sound left Abeni that she didn't plan, half a laugh, half something torn open. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. "He heard me," Malachi said. He looked up, and his whole face had changed. The careful face he wore around adults gone, a 6-year-old under it. "Mama, he heard me." "I know. He's not all the way sleeping." "No," she said. "He's not." She was already moving. She got off her knees, put one hand flat on Malachi's back to keep him there, and with the other, she found the call button clipped to the rail. On the sealed 10th floor, there was no telling where it rang, or whether anyone up here would answer a hospital button at all. She pressed it anyway. Then she pressed it 3 more times, hard, the way you knock on a door you already know is locked. Stay with him, she told Malachi. Keep talking to him. Tell him about the pancakes. The pancakes? Anything. Keep your hand right where it is. Don't stop. She stepped to the foot of the bed and grabbed the paper chart off its hook. Handwritten, off the network, 2 hands in it. She flipped to the last page, to the line underlined twice, and she read the times again. The ones logged 9 days ago. The withdrawal authorized for tonight. Below it a fresh entry in the second hand. A dose. A time. Initials she didn't recognize. The man was answering questions, and someone had written an order to stop him breathing before morning. Behind her, Malachi's voice had gone soft and steady. And she puts the chocolate ones on the bottom so they melt into the plate, and you have to eat fast or they get all... The door opened. Not the woman with the accent. A man in a security suit, the tired one, the one who'd carried her down and whispered about the 2 hands. He stopped in the doorway with his hand still on the frame and took in the room, the boy at the rail, the mother with the chart, the button she'd been hammering. You can't be up here, he said, but he didn't move to take her. He's responsive, Abeni said. He's following commands. My son asked him to squeeze his hand and he did it, twice. The guard's eyes went to the bed, to the hand where 2 fingers still lay loose over Malachi's. That's not... He stopped. They said he was gone. Brain gone. That's the whole... He stopped again. That's the whole reason they could sign the paper, Abeni finished. Yeah, except he's not. She saw it land on him. Saw the thing he'd been carrying for 9 days rearrange itself into something worse. He'd helped guard a room where they were going to let a dead man die, and the man wasn't dead. There's a doctor, Abeni said. A real one. Neurology. Somebody requested a consult and somebody else killed it. She held the chart up so he could see the 2 different hands. I need a neurologist in this room before that order gets carried out. You know the building. I don't. Get me one? The guard looked at the door behind him, at the corridor and whatever weighted down it. If you walk him out, Abeni said, quieter. And that boy grows up knowing his father woke up and a room full of people watched him go anyway. You were in the room. He took his hand off the frame. There's a floor doctor, he said. Overnight. Not theirs. Ours. The hospital's. She came up once when the storm knocked the fire panel and nobody could reset it. She wasn't cleared, but they let her, because it was the alarm. He was already stepping back. Brooks. Something Brooks. Get her, Abeni said. Now. He went. The door didn't lock behind him. She noticed that. He'd left it open on purpose. Malachi hadn't stopped talking. He'd moved on from pancakes to the pendant, telling the man about the cord, about how you weren't supposed to pull it or it snaps. His thumb was moving over the back of the man's hand, small circles, the way Abeni did to him when he woke scared. He's cold on top, Malachi reported, but warm underneath, like a rock in the sun. Abeni came back around the rail and crouched. She looked at the man's face now, let herself. The jaw, the hair fallen over the forehead, the eyes moving under the lids, faster than before, chasing something. Min Jae, she said. The eyes stopped. Then the lids strained, a muscle fighting sedation and losing and fighting again. Don't, she said, and she didn't know if she was talking to him or to herself. Don't push, just stay, we're getting somebody. His lips moved around the tube, no sound, but the shape was there. She'd watched that mouth make that shape across a table 7 years ago, in a language she'd only half learned, the word he used for the people he'd have died for. Family. No, she said softly, not them. Me. It's me. And him. She put her hand over Malachi's hand over his. 3 hands, one on top of the other, on the rail. This is your son. The fingers pressed. All of them this time. The door opened again, and a woman came in fast, white coat over a plum blouse, fine braids pulled back, glasses catching the monitor light. Dr. Evelyn Brooks took 2 steps into the room and stopped the way the guard had stopped, reading it all in a second, except she read different things. Her eyes went to the ventilator settings, to the drip, to the chart in Abeni's hand. Whose patient is this? She said. Not to Abeni. To the room. Nobody's, Abeni said. That's the problem. Behind Evelyn, the guard hovered in the doorway, And behind him, Abeni felt it before she saw it. The corridor had woken up. Voices. The particular quiet of people moving fast without wanting to be heard. "He's following commands," Abeni said, fast, before the room filled. "My son asked him to squeeze. He squeezed on command, twice, delayed but consistent. Eye movement to name, mouth forming words to tube. Whoever charted him as unresponsive. Stop!" Evelyn was already at the bedside, already lifting the man's other wrist, 2 fingers on the pulse, eyes on her clinical watch. "Sir, Kang Min Jae, I'm a doctor. If you can hear me, look toward my voice." The eyes dragged left, toward her. Evelyn went very still. "Again," she said, "look at the window. Look toward the window for me." The eyes went right, to the gray square where the storm was thinning toward dawn. Evelyn set the wrist down like it was made of something that could break. She reached up and pulled the penlight from her coat and thumbed it on, and Abeni watched a doctor's face do the thing faces do when the chart in their hand becomes a crime. "This man is not brain dead," Evelyn said. She said it to no one, and everyone. "He's sedated, heavily, and somebody's been keeping him there." "There's an order," Abeni said. She turned the chart around. "Withdrawal of support tonight. Logged 9 days ago." Evelyn read it. Her jaw worked once. "On what neurology?" she said. "Where's the neuroconsult? Where's the EEG? You don't withdraw on—" She flipped the page, flipped it back. "There's no study in here. There's a request." Her finger hit the first hand. "And a denial." Her finger hit the second. "That's not a medical decision. That's a—" "Dr. Brooks." The voice came from the doorway. The woman with the accent stood there. Behind her, 2 more suits. She had recovered whatever the 10th floor had cost her earlier. Her face was smooth again, her hands folded, the pearl at each ear steady. Her eyes moved over the room and did the arithmetic. The doctor, the chart, the boy, and stopped on the boy. She looked at Malachi for 1 full second, at the eyes, at the shape of the jaw that was going to be the man's jaw. Something crossed her face and was gone before it finished. "You are not cleared for this floor," she said to Evelyn. "Neither is the order in this chart," Evelyn said. She didn't look up. She was drawing the sedative line back through the drip with her eyes, tracing it to the bag. "This patient is responsive. Any withdrawal of support tonight is homicide, and I will document it as such the second I have a pen and a witness, and I already have both." She glanced at Abeni. "Get the exact bag, the label." Abeni was already there. She lifted the IV bag, turned it to the light, read the printed line and the handwritten one under it, and felt the floor tilt. "The concentration doesn't match the order," she said. "The order says 1 number. The bag says almost double." Evelyn came around the bed and looked, and her mouth thinned to nothing. "He's not unresponsive," she said. "He's buried. Somebody's been dosing him past the chart to keep him under." She straightened and finally looked at the woman in the doorway, and her voice dropped into something flat and professional and absolutely without give. "Who has access to this drip?" The woman's chin lifted a fraction. "This is a family matter." It stopped being a family matter when the numbers stopped matching. Evelyn reached up and closed the sedative line with 2 fingers. A small motion, a click. "I'm holding the sedation now. If anyone touches this line, they're touching it in front of a physician who's already called it. You have no authority on. I have a responsive patient and a controlled substance charted at half what's in the bag." Evelyn's braids swung as she turned to the guard. "Is there toxicology in this building tonight? A real lab, not their lab?" "Basement," the guard said. "4th floor draw, basement lab, hospitals." "Then we're drawing him. Now, while the storm's still got the network down, and nobody can lose the sample." She looked at Abeni. You found this?" "I signed for a family meal," Abeni said. "There was 1 plate. Nobody was going to eat it." Evelyn looked at the single covered tray on the cart in the hall, visible through the open door, and understood the whole shape of it in a breath. "Right," she said. The woman in the doorway made a small motion with 1 hand, and one of the suits behind her moved, toward the bed, toward the line. Abeni stepped into the gap before she decided to. She put her body between the man's arm and the guard's reach, the same way she had once already tonight. And this time she had a doctor at her shoulder. "Don't," Abeni said. "Ma'am, The guard's voice was almost gentle. "Step back, Malachi." Abeni didn't take her eyes off the suit. "Hold your father's hand and don't let go." The boy's fingers tightened around the two that lay in his palm. And the hand on the rail, the buried man's hand, turned. Slow, fighting the drug that was already thinning now that the line was closed, it turned in the boy's grip until it wasn't being held, until it was holding. The suit stopped. There is a thing that happens when the story a room has agreed on cracks, and everyone in the room feels it at once. The guard by the door felt it. The tired one felt it. Even the woman with the pearls felt it, because her folded hands unfolded, and for the first time all night, she didn't look like she was in charge of what happened next. "His name is Kang Min Jae," Evelyn said, into that crack, calm as a chart. "He's alive, he's responding, and I'm his physician until someone with more authority than a linen account tells me otherwise." She pulled a pen from her coat, clicked it, and started writing on the back of the chart. Fast. The time, the finding, the closed line, the mismatched bag. A witness building a record in real time. Marisol Vega. "Get me Marisol Vega up here. Nursing tech. She can draw and she'll chart straight. And somebody find out who wrote this second hand." "I know the second hand," Abeni said. Everyone looked at her. She didn't. She'd been watching the woman in the doorway. She'd watched her thumb, earlier, press the back of her own hand when the neurology denial came up. She watched it now, the thumb, seeking the same spot, pressing. "I don't know the name," Abeni said, "but she does." The woman's thumb went still. "You knew," Abeni said, not a question. The same 4 words she'd said to a seguranza and a matriarch tonight, and they landed harder each time. "You knew he could wake up. That's why it had to be tonight. That's why the storm. A man in a coma you can wait on. A man who opens his eyes." She looked at the bed, at the eyes that were open now, glassy and struggling and open, fixed on the woman in the doorway. "You have to close before he does." The room was silent except for the ventilator, and then the man on the bed made the ventilator lie. He breathed against it, over it. A rough, wrong human breath that the machine hadn't asked for, and the monitor spiked and Evelyn's head snapped toward it. "He's overbreathing the vent," she said, and there was something under the clinical flatness now, something close to wonder. "He's trying to breathe on his own." Min Jae. Abeni was at the rail again, both hands on the top of it, leaning in. "Don't fight it. Let the machine. Just, we're here. We're not leaving. Do you understand? Squeeze if you understand." Malachi's hand jerked. "He did. Mama, he did it." "I felt it." She was crying now and didn't stop to deal with it. Okay. Evelyn's hand went back to the drip. She followed the tubing up to the bag, down to the port, checking the whole run of it with her fingers, the way you check a rope you're about to trust your weight to. "How long has he been on this line?" she said, to the tired guard now, because he was the one still talking. "Since they moved him up, 9 days, maybe 10. And the dose got changed." The guard's throat worked. "There was a nurse, one of the 2 they brought. She'd come at shift change and do something to the bag and write in the book and leave. I thought it was normal. I don't do medicine. I thought—" He stopped. "I thought it was normal." It wasn't. Evelyn didn't say it cruel. She said it like a fact she needed him to hold on to for later. In a room with a recorder in it. Somebody titrated a responsive man into silence and charted half of what they gave him. That's not care. Remember that you told me before anyone made you. Abeni's eyes hadn't left the bag. She turned it once more, thumbnail under the handwritten line, reading the initials that weren't Evelyn's, that weren't any doctor's she'd have signed a tray for. "These initials," she said, "they're not on the staff board downstairs. I know every name that touches a tray in this building. This isn't one of them." Evelyn glanced at the initials, then at Abeni, and something passed between the 2 women, quick and complete. The food service supervisor who knew every real name in the building, and the doctor who knew what a real order looked like, both looking at the same forgery. "Then it's a name that got made up to hold a pen," Evelyn said. "Keep that bag. Don't let it out of your hand until it's in a bag with a seal on it." Malachi had gone quiet against Abeni's side, watching the grown-ups the way children watch a storm through a window, knowing it's big, not sure yet if it can reach them. His hand was still in his father's. He hadn't been told to keep it there in a while. He just hadn't let go. Mama, he whispered. Is he going to stay awake? Abeni looked at the bed, at the eyes fighting up through 9 days of chemical dark, losing and climbing, and losing and climbing. The doctor's helping him, she said. That's what she's doing. She's helping him stay. Because you found the plate. Because I found the plate. The woman in the doorway said something in Korean, low and fast, to the suits behind her. Abeni's whole body flinched at the sound of it. The old animal flinch, 7 years deep. But she didn't look away from the bed this time. She let the language crawl over her skin, and she stayed exactly where she was. Whatever she just said, Abeni told Evelyn without turning, put it in your notes that she said it. In front of witnesses, while you held the line, Evelyn wrote. The tired guard, still in the doorway, stepped sideways. Not out, but in. Into the room, onto the side of the bed. A small treason, fully committed. The camera in this hall's been dark since Sunday, he said, to Evelyn, to the record. I flagged it. Nobody fixed it. I want that in there too. Evelyn wrote that. The woman with the pearls looked at her own security man crossing to the other side, at the doctor building a case in ink, at the boy holding the hand, at Abeni, between all of it and the drip, and Abeni watched her recalculate, watched her understand that the quiet way was gone, that there was no version of tonight where a plate went uneaten and a machine got turned off and everyone went home. Move the child, the woman said. Her voice had changed, faster. This is not a place for a child. He's exactly where he belongs, Abeni said. You have no idea what you've walked into. I walked into my son's father. Abeni finally turned and looked at her. Full on, no flinch left. You spent 7 years and a fake death notice keeping me out of this room. You lost. He woke up and the first hand he held was your grandson's. You can call the police. You can take my badge. He's still going to have opened his eyes with us in the room, and every person standing here is going to have seen it. The word grandson did something. The woman's face, which had held all night, moved. A hairline fracture at the mouth, quickly sealed. But Evelyn saw it. Malachi, watching everything the way children watch, saw it. And the man on the bed, whose eyes had been chasing the woman in the doorway, made a sound around the tube. Low. A vowel with a shape to it. They all heard it try to be a word. Evelyn crossed to him. Don't talk. Not against the tube. You'll hurt yourself. She checked the monitor, the sat, the rhythm. You're doing enough. You're doing more than enough. But the man's eyes had left the woman in the doorway and found Abeni. Dragged across the room to her and stopped, and held, and under the sedation thinning out of him breath by breath, under 7 years, something in that ruined, struggling face knew her. His mouth made the shape again. Not family this time. 2 syllables. Her name, or the start of it, the sound he'd called her by in another country, in another life, before a woman with pearls decided that life was over. Abeni put her hand over his. I'm here, she said. The same 2 words she'd pressed into his wrist an hour ago, when he couldn't hear them. He could hear them now. I told you I'm here, and I brought somebody. She reached down without letting go of the man, and drew Malachi up against her side, so the boy was at the rail, at eye level, his small hand still folded into his father's. His name is Malachi, she said. He's 6. He has your eyes. He's known your face his whole life, and he found you in the dark by himself tonight, and he called you Dad, before anybody told him he was allowed to. The man's eyes moved to the boy, slow, deliberate, a man spending everything he had left to look at one thing. And the boy, 6 years old, up past a night he'd remember forever, holding a hand that had turned to hold him back, leaned over the rail and did the thing he'd practiced 100 times on a photograph in a drawer, the thing he'd never once gotten to do awake. Hi, Dad, Malachi said. I waited. Behind them, Evelyn Brooks quietly closed the sedative clamp a second notch and wrote down the time. Behind her, the tired guard put himself in the doorway with his back to the room and his face to the corridor, a body between the bed and whatever came next. And in the doorway, the woman with the pearls stood alone now, her people drifting, her story broken open on the floor, watching a grandson she'd erased before he was born say hi to a son she'd buried alive. The storm was almost done outside, gray coming up behind it. Somewhere 6 floors down, a phone was ringing at a nurse's station, and Marisol Vega was about to be paged to the 10th floor, and a toxicology sample was about to leave a sealed ward while the network was still down and nobody could make it disappear. The woman in the doorway looked at all of it. Then she looked, last, at Abeni. "You think this is the end?" she said, quietly, almost kind. "This is the part where it gets dangerous." "I know," Abeni said. She didn't let go of either hand. "It's been dangerous for 7 years. I just didn't get a vote." She turned back to the bed, to the two people whose hands were in hers, and she stopped watching the door. Down the hall, the elevator chimed, and the sound of it coming up was the sound of the whole thing about to get much bigger than one room. The doors opened on suits she hadn't seen yet. 4 of them, dry, pressed, badges clipped to their jackets that said the hospital's name in a font Abeni knew from her own paycheck. Administration. The night administrator, a man named Halverson she'd emailed twice about tray budgets and never once met in person, walked ahead of them with a tablet against his chest like a shield. He stopped at the door, he looked at the bed, he looked at the child holding the patient's hand. He looked at Abeni in her sage jacket with the hospital's badge still clipped to the white side closure, and something in his face closed like a till drawer. "Miss Clark," he said, "you're not assigned to this floor." "No," Abeni said, "I'm not. Your access was flagged 40 minutes ago." "Somebody flagged it," she said. "That's not the same sentence." Behind Halverson, the woman with the pearls said nothing at all. She had folded her hands. She had let the building's own people arrive to do the thing her security had failed to do, and she watched them do it the way a person watches a kettle she already knew would boil. Halverson crouched a little, the way adults do at a child, and Malachi pressed back into his father's forearm. Min Jae's 2 fingers were still shut over the small hand. The monitor kept its new rhythm, the one it had found when the man started breathing over the machine. "Sweetheart, you need to come away from the bed." "He's holding on," Malachi said, not defiant, reporting. Evelyn stepped between them, coat first. "He's a documented responsive patient now," she said. "I've charted it. There's a sealed bag going to the lab and a clamped line, and I'd advise you to read what I wrote before you touch anything on this floor." "You're not on this case, Dr. Brooks." "There isn't a case," Evelyn said. "There's a paper chart, 2 different hands, and a concentration that doesn't match the order. That's not a case. That's a question somebody's going to have to answer under a light." Halverson straightened. He was not a cruel man. Abeni could see that, and it was almost worse, because a cruel man she could have pushed against. He was a scheduled man. He had a script from somewhere above him, and he read it. "There's a family directive on this patient. The family is present. I'm asking hospital personnel who are not assigned to step back and let the family and the patient's own team manage care." "The patient's own team was killing him," Abeni said. The word landed in the room and stayed there. Yoon-suk lifted her chin 1 degree. "Grief," she said, to Halverson, gently, as if translating. "This woman came onto a sealed floor with a child at 4 in the morning. She has a story. I understand she is upset." "I'm not upset," Abeni said. "I'm on the record." But she felt the floor tilt, and she knew what the tilt was. It was the moment a true thing stops being enough because a louder machine has started somewhere else. They took her badge at the nurses' station on the 10th floor, in front of the sleepy security man who'd changed sides, in front of Evelyn, in front of a second administrator who'd come up in the freight car with a printed form already filled in. Abeni read it upside down, while Halverson slid it across the counter. Her name, her employee number, the words. "Administrative leave, pending review." "Effective now," Halverson said. "It's not a termination, it's a pause." "You typed my number before you came up," Abeni said. "You paused me 9 floors ago." He didn't answer that. He turned the form and pointed at the line. She didn't sign it. She had refused to sign 1 tray tonight, and she refused to sign this. And refusing had become the only muscle she had left. She put the pen down beside the paper, exactly parallel to the edge, and she took the lanyard from around her neck and set it on the counter without throwing it. And the small gold stud in her ear caught the light when she bent, and she straightened, and she was, for the first time in 4 years, a woman standing in that hospital who was not allowed to be there. "My son is upstairs," she said. "I'm not leaving the building without my son. The child can come with you. Nobody's keeping the child. That was the sentence that told her they didn't understand yet whom the child was. She almost laughed. Instead, she said, "Good," and went to get him, and behind her she heard Yoon-suk say something low in Korean to one of the suits, and the sound of it went down her spine like a cold key, and she did not turn around, and she counted that, privately, as the last thing she won that night. Marisol found her in the 7th-floor stairwell 20 minutes later, sitting 2 steps up with Malachi asleep against her side, his sneakers back on his feet, the laces still tucked in the way he tucked them. "They pulled my badge," Abeni said. "I heard." Marisol sat on the step below. Whole floor heard. "Petrakis is telling anybody who'll stand still that you caught a duplicated tray and saved a renal patient 6 hours ago, like that's going to matter to the people upstairs." "It won't." "It won't," Marisol agreed. She was not a person who softened things. It was why Abeni had trusted her with the child. "But I logged the collection. The talks went to the basement in a sealed bag with 2 signatures, mine and Brooks's, and it's sitting in a locked fridge with the network still down, which means nobody upstairs can reach in and lose it remotely. It has to walk out. Somebody has to physically carry it out, and if they do, that's a person on a camera. The camera on 10's been off since Sunday. The basement's isn't." Marisol looked at the sleeping boy. "You want me to take him home?" "No." Abeni put her hand flat on Malachi's back, feeling it rise and fall. "He doesn't leave where I can see him. Not tonight." She didn't say the rest. The rest was a thing she'd understood the moment Yoon-suk's face had done its small fracture on the word. Grandson. The moment the Pearls had learned the boy existed, the boy had become a piece on a board, and Abeni had spent 7 years keeping him off every board there was. Marisol was quiet for a while. The stairwell hummed with the building's own machinery, the sound Abeni had worked inside for 4 years and never really heard until tonight, when it was no longer hers. "You know what they're going to do," Marisol said finally. "They're not going to fight you loud. Loud is expensive. They're going to make it so nobody who could help you thinks it's worth the trouble. That's how people with names win. They don't beat you, they make you cost too much." "I know. So you make yourself worth the trouble to somebody who can't be bought." Marisol stood, knees cracking, and looked down at the sleeping boy. "That's the whole game, mija. Find the one person in this building whose paycheck they don't sign." Abeni thought about a doctor sitting on a stool in the basement, guarding a fridge. She didn't say the name out loud, but something in her chest that had been sinking all night found a ledge and held. By 7 in the morning the rain had stopped and the water in the streets had begun, slowly, to decide to leave. Abeni was in the family room on 7, with Malachi eating vending machine crackers, when Evelyn came in and shut the door behind her and stood with her back against it. "They ran a DNA test," Evelyn said. Abeni went still. "Not me. I want you to hear that from me first. Not me. Not my order. Someone up there had a buccal kit, brought in before dawn. They swabbed the patient. And they swabbed your son." The cracker stopped halfway to Malachi's mouth. He looked between the 2 women, reading the air the way 6-year-olds do. Better than adults think. "When?" Abeni said. "An hour ago, a woman in scrubs I didn't recognize told him it was a taste test." Evelyn's jaw worked. "He opened his mouth for her. He's a good kid. He does what nice grown-ups ask." Abeni was on her feet, not toward the door. There was no door worth going toward. That was the whole horror of it. Just up, her body demanding to move with nowhere to put the motion. "They can't do that. He's a minor. I'm his mother. You need consent." They had a consent. Evelyn said it flat, so the flatness would carry what her voice couldn't. "Signed. This morning. By a legal representative of the family acting. The form says, 'In the interest of the patient.' It's got a lawyer's stamp. It went through fast because nothing that fast is clean, and I'm telling you now so that when it comes back, you already know what it's going to say." "It's going to say he's Min-jae's son," Abeni said. "I already know he's Min-jae's son. I've known for 6 years. What do they want with a piece of paper that says the thing I've been living?" She heard her own voice climb and pulled it back down. Malachi had set the cracker on his knee and gone very still, the way he went still when adults said his name in a room he wasn't supposed to understand. She reached over and closed her hand around his ankle, an anchor, a small warm circle of, "You're here, I'm here." Evelyn looked at her a long moment. Because you living it is a story a night shift supervisor tells. A lab result is a fact a board has to act on. She pushed off the door. Benny, the moment that result is on paper, your boy stops being your secret and starts being their heir. And there's a vote coming. What vote? I heard 2 of the suits in the elevator. 8 days. There's a board vote in 8 days. Something about control of the company, signatures, a seat. I don't understand the corporate part, but I understood the part where one of them said, and I'm quoting, "It's cleaner if the boy's status is settled before the vote." Evelyn's fine braids had come slightly loose at the temple. She pushed them back. Settled. That's the word he used about your child. Settled. Malachi had stopped chewing. He was watching his mother's face with his father's eyes, and Ebony made herself unclench her hands, made her shoulders come down, because he read her body the way she read a chart. "Hey," she said to him, soft. "Eat your crackers, we're okay." "Are we going home?" "Soon," she said, and it was the first lie she'd told him in 14 hours, and it cost her more than all the truth had. The story broke at 11:40 that morning. Ebony found out the way everyone found out, which was that Marisol came into the family room holding her own phone at arm's length like it might bite. The headline had a photo. It was Ebony's own badge photo, the flat blue one they took on your first day, lifted from the hospital's own system, and next to it the words did their work in a font built to be believed. A woman, a night shift food service worker, a wealthy Korean family, a dying man, and the word that Yoon Suk had chosen, the word that turned a mother into a monster with 3 syllables. Extortion. The story said Ebony had entered a sealed private ward. True. That she had refused to leave. True. That she had put a child in the room and used the child to claim a relationship to a comatose billionaire. And there it was, the truth bent exactly 90 degrees, so that every real thing in it pointed the wrong way. She had put the child in the room. She had claimed the relationship. Written like that, in that order, with that word at the top, she was a woman running a con on a dying man's fortune. And the fact that the man was the boy's father, the one fact that unbent the whole thing, was the fact the story left out. "They didn't lie," Ebony said. Her voice came out strange. "That's what you have to understand. They didn't have to lie. They just took the wall out from under the true parts." "There's a statement from the family," Marisol said. "You want it? Read it." Marisol read it. It was 4 sentences. It expressed the family's grief. It expressed the family's shock that an employee had exploited a medical tragedy. It said the family was cooperating fully with hospital security and, if necessary, the police. It was signed. The Kang family, which was a thing that did not exist, which was one woman with pearls and a jade ring, who had decided that a name could be a weapon if you held it by the right end. Ebony sat down slowly on the vinyl couch where her son had slept. For a moment she felt the thing they wanted her to feel. She felt small. She felt like a badge photo. She felt every one of the 4 years she'd carried trays down these halls and every one of the 9 years before that, and she felt how easily all of it could be picked up and turned so the light hit it wrong, and how there was no version of her word, night worker, single mother, no lawyer, no name, that would ever be as loud as 4 pressed sentences signed. The family. Then Malachi put his small hand on her knee, the way she had put hers on his back in the stairwell, copying her, and he said, "You're doing your worried face." And the smallness went out of her like water leaving the street. "I am," she admitted. "You caught me." "Is it about the man? About Dad?" She had not heard him say it out loud in daylight yet. Dad. It undid something and rebuilt it in the same second. "It's about people who want to decide things about you," she said, "without asking you. And I don't let people do that. That's a rule. That's an older rule than don't wander off the couch." He nodded like that made sense, because to him it did. They moved Minjae at 2 in the afternoon. Ebony wasn't in the room. She learned it from Evelyn, who'd been barred from the 10th floor by then, and had planted herself in the basement lab instead, sitting on a stool by the locked fridge like a woman guarding a door, because the tox sample was the only thing in the building that couldn't be argued with, and she was not going to let it out of her sight. But before they moved him, something happened that Evelyn made sure Ebony heard about directly, because it mattered. because it was the first move the man himself had made on the board. Min-jae had come up far enough to write. Not speak. He was still on the vent, still weak, the tube taking his voice. But when a nurse held the chart against a clipboard and put a pen in the hand that could close, he had written 4 words, in a hand that shook, that Evelyn photographed before anyone could take the page. Move them, keep safe. And under it, an estate address none of the hospital people recognized, and a name that turned out to be his own family's, a house upstate behind a gate and a wall, security, doctors, everything money buys when money decides to buy protection. He'd done it, Evelyn said, because he'd surfaced enough to understand one thing and only one thing, that his mother's people had found out about the boy, and that a boy his mother's people had found out about was a boy in danger, and that the only safety he had ever known how to give anyone was a wall and men with radios. He had ordered his son moved to safety. He had not asked the boy's mother. No, Abeni said. She said it in the corridor outside the family room, to the 2 suits who had come down with the paperwork, to the woman lawyer with the soft voice and the folder, to the whole apparatus that had descended 1 floor to collect her and her child and deliver them to a gate upstate, like a package the recipient had paid for. Mr. Kang has arranged for your protection and the child's, the lawyer said. A residence, staff, physicians, security. Given this morning's, media attention, I'd have thought. He arranged it, Abeni said. That's the word you keep using. Arranged, directed. He wrote 4 words on a chart and a wall went up around my son, and nobody in this hallway thought the boy's mother might have a 5th word. He's trying to keep the child safe. I know he is. And this was the part that split her, because it was true, and truth was supposed to help, and here was a truth that only made it worse. I know exactly what he's trying to do. He surfaced for 1 hour and reached for the only thing he's got, which is a wall. That's the language his whole family speaks. Walls, gates, being moved, being disappeared. His mother told me he drowned and put me behind one kind of wall for 7 years, and now he wakes up, and the first thing he does is build me another one, a nicer one, with doctors, and he thinks that's love, and maybe for him it is, and I am not going to do it. The lawyer opened her folder. The alternative is you and the child, unprotected, with your face on a story that calls you an extortionist, no income as of this morning, and a family that... You think I don't know my alternatives. Abeni's voice didn't rise. It got quiet, which was worse. I have counted my alternatives at 3 in the morning, more nights than you've been awake past midnight. Don't read me my life like it's news. Down the hall, through the family room door she'd left cracked, she could see Malachi kneeling on the couch with his face to the little window, watching the water go down in the streets. 6 years old, forest green overshirt gone soft from a night of being slept in. He had waited his whole life for a man in a drawer, and last night the man had held his hand, and today grown-ups with folders wanted to put him behind a gate for his own good, and nobody in the hallway had said his name once. If I get in that car, Abeni said, he learns the same thing his father learned, that when things get dangerous, you let the people with money move you where they want you, and you call it safe. I'm not teaching him that, not on the first day he's got a father to watch. Mr. Kang was very clear. Then somebody can tell Mr. Kang something for me. She took a breath. She chose the words the way she chose which tray was wrong out of 140. Tell him I heard him. Tell him I know what he was reaching for. And tell him the answer is that if he wants to keep us safe, he can wake all the way up, and stand up, and do it in the light with his own name, not from a bed, not through his mother's people, not with a gate. Tell him I've had enough of the Kang family deciding where I stand from a room I'm not allowed into. She stepped past the lawyer. She wasn't asked to sign anything this time. They had learned, at least, that she didn't sign. She went into the family room and crouched at the window beside her son, and did not get in the car. Through the glass they both watched the 2 suits and the soft-voiced lawyer walk out across the wet ambulance bay and get into a black car that had been idling since noon, and watched it pull away toward a highway that led to a gate, empty, carrying nobody, which was the only thing Abeni Clark had left to send back up the 10th floor, an empty car, and the fact of a mother who would not be moved. Malachi leaned his head on her shoulder. Are they mad at us? Some of them, she put her arm around him, some of them are scared, and it looks the same from the outside. Is Dad mad? She thought about the 4 shaking words on the chart. Move them, keep safe. She thought about a man who had spent 9 days being poured full of a drug so he'd stay a corpse, surfacing for 1 hour and using it to try to save the boy he'd met once. No, she said. Dad's not mad. Dad's just been in a room too long to know you can't build a wall around a person to love them. We're going to have to teach him that. Both of us. That's a hard rule, Malachi said, considering it seriously. It's the hardest one, Abeni said. She didn't cry in front of him. She waited until Marisol came to sit with him. Off the clock now, we're doing it as a friend, because friends were the only staff Abeni had left, and then she went down the service stairs she wasn't supposed to use anymore, badgeless, a trespasser in the building where she'd fixed 1,000 trays, and she stood on the landing without cameras, where all of this had started 12 hours ago, when a babysitter canceled, and she let herself have it, the whole day, for exactly 2 minutes. Then she stopped. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She had a phone with a photo Evelyn had sent her, a chart, 4 shaking words, a sample number, a name that wasn't on any staff roster. She had a nurse in a basement guarding a fridge. She had a security man who'd changed sides and knew about 2 hands on a chart. She had a supervisor named Petrakis telling anyone who'd listen that she'd saved a renal patient at 1 a.m., and a doctor who'd photographed a bag before it could disappear. She had a boy upstairs with his father's eyes who had called a stranger Dad, and meant it, and she had 8 days. Abeni put the phone in the inside pocket of her sage jacket, the pocket with the button, and she pressed the button closed with her thumb, the way she pressed everything closed when it mattered. On the 10th floor, a man was being loaded onto a transport gurney to be taken behind a wall he'd asked for. Somewhere above her, a woman with pearls was already writing the next 4 sentences. And somewhere in a basement, a locked fridge held the one small, cold thing that none of their money could argue with, if, only if, somebody could keep it from walking out the door before a board of strangers had to look at it in 8 days' time. She climbed back up the stairs she wasn't allowed on. She had lost her badge, her paycheck, her name in the only newspaper anyone would read, and the argument about where her own son would sleep tonight. She had lost, on paper, everything a woman like her was supposed to be able to lose. She reached the 7th floor and opened the door, and there was her son, alive, unmoved, still hers, watching the water leave the streets. That they hadn't gotten. Not yet. The steel cart was still in the loading dock when Abeni came down the service stair the next morning. Nobody had claimed it. Nobody signed for it. It sat against the wall by the compactor, its locked wheels finally freed. One meal lid still clamped to the top like a lie somebody forgot to throw away. She crouched and read the underside of the frame. Not a hospital tag. A rental sticker. A scheduling account printed in 6 digits she had seen once before, in a memo 6 weeks old. She photographed it. She did the thing Marisol told her. She followed the money to the person the Kang name didn't pay. The dock supervisor came out with his coffee. Ernie, 20 years on the same shift. You're the one they're writing about, he said. I am. He looked at the cart. He looked at her. That thing came in Sunday, on a private truck. Driver had no manifest and no patience. He sipped. I logged it anyway. I log everything. You have the log? I have the log. 2 days before the board vote, that was the first crack. A man who logged everything because nobody ever paid him enough to stop. Marisol found the second crack in the security office at the end of her shift, off the clock, badge clipped, asking a favor of a tech who owed her from the flood night. The 10th floor corridor camera had a service record, not broken, disabled. A work order dated Sunday, entered under a maintenance credential, requesting the East Wing feed be pulled for scheduled recalibration. No recalibration was performed. No technician was dispatched. The camera simply went dark and stayed dark through the night they chose. The credential that filed the order didn't belong to maintenance. Marisol printed it. She printed the subsurface camera log too, the one that still worked, the basement, the toxicology fridge, because a sealed bag with 2 signatures was sitting behind that glass, and every hour it sat there uncollected was an hour it could not disappear. She texted Abeni 4 words, Camera was turned off. Abeni texted back one. By who? Marisol didn't have the name yet. She had the credential number. She sent it to Evelyn. Evelyn had not left the basement in a day and a half. She had a cot the second shift text brought her, and a stack of charting she copied by hand before anyone could pull the paper. She had the photograph of Min Jae's 4 written words. She had the IV bag, sealed, logged, cold, and she had the second handwriting. She laid the chart flat under the lamp and set beside it a company consent form, the one that had authorized the DNA swab, stamped by a family legal representative, signed in a clean, confident hand. She set beside that the withdrawal of support authorization from the 10th floor. She set beside both the credential number Marisol sent. 3 signatures. She was a neurologist, not a document examiner. She didn't need to be. The loop of the same capital letter fell the same wrong way in all 3. The sedation order, the consent, the maintenance work order that killed the camera. One hand had touched all of them, and it had practiced someone else's name until the practice showed. She knew whose name it was practicing. The signature it copied was hers. Her own. Evelyn Brooks. Lifted off a chart she'd signed the flood night when she first came up to the 10th floor and was turned away. Someone had photographed her signature and taught their hand to make it, so that when the toxicology came back wrong, it would come back under her name and not theirs. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up the phone and called Abeni and said, "They didn't just dose him. They built it to land on me." They met that night in the basement, the 3 of them, around the toxicology fridge like it was a fire. Abeni had the cart sticker and Ernie's log. Marisol had the disabled camera work order and the credential number. Evelyn had the 3 signatures and the copy of her own name. What they did not have was the person. The credential belonged to a logistics and scheduling account, the same account that provisioned the private badges, the linen cart, the 2 silent float nurses. A shell that signed itself family decision, so no single hand would ever show. But shells are opened by people, and people badge in. Marisol ran the credential against the 10th floor access log for the 9 days before the flood. It entered the sealed wing 4 times. Each entry, 30 to 40 minutes. Each entry, followed within the hour by a new line in Min Jae's chart in the second hand. A dose adjusted up, a consult denied, a bag swapped. The credential had a photograph on file. Marisol pulled it. Charcoal suit, dark tie, hair slicked straight back, a face Abeni had never seen and Evelyn had seen once, in a hallway, standing behind Yoon-suk and saying nothing. Kang Joon-ho. The cousin, the one with no dragon on his neck and no chair he was born into, the one who had spent 9 days walking into a dying man's room to make sure the man kept dying. Abeni looked at the face on the badge for a long time. "Why?" she said. "Not to anyone. To the photo." Evelyn had part of it. She'd spent a day and a half in a basement with a man's medical record and a company's paper, and records tell on people. The withdrawal was scheduled 9 days ago, she said. The DNA swab was rushed before dawn. The board votes in. She checked the date. 2 days. Somebody needed the boy's status settled and the man's chart closed before the vote. Both, in that window. Because a dead man can't sign, Abeni said slowly, and a man who wakes up can look at his own accounts. Marisol pulled the last thread. She was a tech, not an auditor, but she knew how to read a schedule, and the logistics account had a spending trail attached to it. Vendor payments routed through the same shell that badged into the room. Payments to a private security outfit. Payments to a linen service that didn't exist. Payments, going back years, tagged to contracts signed with a company initial cufflink signature. Money leaving the company through a door only Joon-ho held the key to. For years, while the man whose name was on the door was presumed drowned and could not check. He wasn't hiding a murder, Abeni said. He was hiding a robbery. The murder was just how you close the robbery. She sat down on the cold floor with her back against the fridge. 7 years, she had built a whole life around the word. Drowned. She had told her son his father was gone, and the whole time, the man was breathing under someone's careful hand, and the reason he'd never come was not that he didn't want to. The reason was that a cousin needed him gone, and a mother chose to make it true. She learned the last of it from Min Jae himself, and it came the way the revelation was always going to come. not in a speech, in an object. Evelyn had photographed his 4 written words the day they moved him. Move them. Keep safe. And under those words, on the same page, in the same trembling hand pushed almost off the line, were 2 more things Abeni had not been shown until now, because Evelyn had zoomed past them in the panic of the transfer and only found them scrolling back. A number, an account number, and 3 words, she paid Oshai. Abeni didn't understand it. Marisol did. Oshai was not a place the Kangs summered. Oshai was the name printed on a notice, 7 years old, filed by a family attorney, a death notice for a man lost at sea near a town called Oshai. The notice that reached Abeni as a letter, the notice that made her cry a living man. Somebody had paid for that notice, bought it, commissioned a death that hadn't happened, on paper, with a fee. Minjai had found the payment. Before the flood, before the sedation, before the sealed wing, he had been well enough, briefly, to look at his own company's ledger, and he had found his mother's name attached to the fee for his own funeral notice. He had found the account Junho drained. He had started to pull the thread, and 9 days before the flood, the withdrawal of support was scheduled. He didn't write it as an accusation. He wrote it as a location on a map for whoever came after. She paid Ohai. 4 other words to keep his son safe, and 3 to tell the truth about how the lie was born. He never knew about the pregnancy. That was the part that split Abeni open in the basement, sitting on the floor at 2 in the morning, he wrote. Keep safe. About a child he had learned existed 6 hours earlier, in a hospital bed, with a boy's hand in his. He had not chosen the wall of silence 7 years ago. His mother had built it, and paid for it, and told each of them the other was gone. He had grieved Abeni the same 7 years she had grieved him. He hadn't stayed away. He'd been kept. Marisol crouched down beside her on the cold floor and didn't say anything smart, which was how Abeni knew it was bad. Evelyn kept working. She had a doctor's habit of moving her hands when her chest was full. I told my son he drowned, Abeni said. I said the word to a 6-year-old. I practiced saying it so it wouldn't shake. She pressed the heel of her hand under one eye. She sold me that word. You didn't buy it, Marisol said. Somebody sold it to you. Different thing. It doesn't feel different. It will, Evelyn said, not looking up from the chart. When a room full of people who owe her money have to hear it out loud, it'll feel very different then. Abeni looked at the fridge, at the sealed bag behind the glass, at the 3 signatures under the lamp. She had lost a badge and a salary and her name in a newspaper. She had not lost this. The paper on the table was true, and true survives a lamp, and a lamp was all they had down here, and it was enough. The board voted on a Tuesday, in a glass room 40 floors up, with the flood a week gone and the river back in its banks. Abeni was not supposed to be there. She was on administrative leave, named in the press as an extortionist, badge surrendered, salary stopped. But the vote concerned the guardianship representation of a minor now confirmed by laboratory result to be Kang Min-jae's son, and the minor's mother had a legal right to speak to that item, and a hospital ethics attorney, who had read Evelyn's charting, had made very sure the right could not be quietly removed from the agenda. She wore the ivory blouse. She left Malachi with Mrs. Okafor and the pendant around his neck and a promise about pancakes she intended to keep this time. Yunan Suk was at the head of the table in pearl gray, brooch, jade ring, the face that gave nothing. Junho sat 2 seats down in charcoal, thin watch, the cufflinks with the company's initial. He had a folder. He had a smile he kept controlled. The chair called the item. A family attorney rose to move that guardianship representation of the minor be assigned to the family trust, effective immediately, and that the matter of the mother be handled through appropriate channels. Then the screen at the end of the room turned on, because Abeni had asked for one thing, and the ethics attorney had gotten it, and Kang Min-jae appeared by video from a room upstate, in dark clothes, upright in a chair, a cane hooked on the arm of it, his left hand resting weak and half-curled in his lap, and the dragon dark on his neck above the collar. The room went quiet in a particular way, the way a room goes quiet when the dead sit up. He spoke slowly. His voice came back in pieces, sanded thin by the tube, and he used few words, because few was all he had, and it was enough. I am not drowned, he said. I was held. He looked, on the screen, toward where he had been told Abeni was sitting. His eyes found the camera and stayed. My cousin moved money for years while you buried me, he said to the table. My mother bought the notice that buried me. I have the account. Dr. Brooks has the chart. The technician has the log. He lifted his right hand, the good one, and it shook, and he set it back down, and the shaking was worse than any raised voice, because everyone at that table had spent 7 years believing this man was the strongest thing in any room, and here he was, spending everything he had to hold his own hand still, and doing it in the light, with his own name, exactly as Abeni had told him he must. Let her speak, he said, then vote. Abeni stood. She did not shout. She had a folder too, and hers was thicker, and every page in it was true, and could be checked. She laid it out the way she plated 140 trays a night, in order, nothing missing, nothing where it shouldn't be. The cart, with its rental sticker and its scheduling account, logged into the dock Sunday by a supervisor who logged everything. The corridor camera, disabled by work order under a maintenance credential that filed no repair. The credential, badging into the sealed wing 4 times in 9 days, each entry followed by a change in a dying man's chart in a second hand. The photograph on that credentials file, she turned it and set it on the table facing the man in the charcoal suit. The IV bag, sealed, twice signed, cold in a basement fridge, at nearly double the ordered dose. The 3 signatures with the same wrong loop, a sedation order, a consent form, a work order, all practicing one name. Dr. Evelyn Brooks's name, copied so the poison would land on the doctor and not the cousin. The ledger. The money leaving the company through a door Junho held, for years, tagged to a cufflink signature, and the fee, paid to a firm near Ojai 7 years ago for a notice of a death that never happened. She set the last page down. You told the press I invented a family to extort one, she said to Yoon Suk. I didn't invent it. You erased it. And then you sent me a bill for grieving. Yoon Suk's thumb pressed the back of her own hand. The tell, the same one Evelyn had seen in the sealed room. She had no card left to turn, and she knew the exact second she'd lost it, and her face did the small fracture it had done once before, the one Malachi had caught and named without words. Junho stood, because men like Junho always stand, always reach for the folder, always have one more clean sentence. This is a grieving woman and a sick man, he began, being used to. Sit down, said the man on the screen. Junho did not sit down. He opened his folder. The chair of the board opened a laptop instead, because the ethics attorney had done more than get a screen. She had gotten the ledger in front of the audit committee that morning, and the audit committee had done what auditors do when a live account matches a live crime. On the vote to assign guardianship to the trust, the chair called instead for a motion to freeze the accounts named in the filing pending investigation, and the motion carried before Junho finished his sentence. His folder was still open when his phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again, then it did not stop, because contracts signed on a stolen key unwind fast when the key is shown to the room, and vendors who had been paid through a shell were, at that moment, learning the shell was frozen and calling to say so. He looked at his phone. He looked at the screen where his cousin sat holding his own hand still. He closed the folder. You were supposed to stay drowned, he said, quiet, to no one. And it was the only true thing he'd said in 7 years, and it was a confession, and 11 board members heard it. Security came for him at the door, not the private outfit with the blank lanyards, the building's own, with photographs on their badges. The board removed Yoon Suk from her seat by a vote that did not take long. She did not fight it. She gathered her things with the same controlled hands, the brooch, the folder, and at the door she stopped beside Abeni, close, and said something low in Korean. Abeni felt the old thing happen in her chest, the flinch, 7 years deep, the sound of the language the wall was built in. She felt it, and she did not look away, and she did not step back, and she waited until the woman was done. I don't speak it, Abeni said. I never did. He used to say the sweetest things to me in it, and I only knew they were sweet from his face. You used it to give an order to take my son. I heard that one fine. Yoon Suk's face did the fracture a third time, all the way through now, and then she was gone, and the sound of the language went with her, and it did not follow Abeni out of the room the way it had followed her for 7 years. She left it on the floor of the glass room, and she did not pick it up again. They reinstated her that week. The hospital's own ethics review, once it read Evelyn's charting and Petrakis's account of the renal tray and the truth of what a night supervisor had actually done during a flood, did not just clear her. Halverson, who had filled in her employee number before the ink was dry, was the one made to sign the reversal. They gave her back the badge. Then they gave her a new one, Director of Nutrition Services, nights and days both, a raise that meant she could stop counting the studio rent against the pancakes. The retraction ran on the same outlet that ran the word. Extortion. Smaller, the way retractions always run, but it ran, and the word attached to her name now was the true one. She read it in the family room of Ward 7, on the same couch where her son had slept through a storm. Marisol brought coffee. Evelyn came off her cot in the basement for the first time in days and drank it standing, and the three of them did not make speeches, because they had been the kind of tired that speeches don't reach, and they just drank the coffee. Min Jae came back to the city in the fall, not to a sealed wing, to an ordinary apartment with a ramp he pretended not to need, dark clothes, a black overcoat, a cane with a sober finish that he leaned on more than he let on. His left hand was slow to close and always would be. He did his exercises with it every morning, the same motion, open and shut, the way he'd been ordered to squeeze in a hospital bed by a 6-year-old. He did not ask to take Malachi. That was the first thing Abeni watched for and the thing he did not do. He renounced the trust's claim in writing, publicly, with his own weak hand, at a table with a lawyer and the boy's mother, and no gate anywhere near. He acknowledged his son, said the name, Malachi Clark, said it in front of the people who had spent a fortune pretending the name did not exist, and in the same breath he refused to make him an heir to any of it. He does not inherit the company, Min Jae said. The company is how they tried to kill me. He inherits nothing built on a stolen key. He would not hand his son a throne with blood under it, and he would not decide the boy's life over the boy's mother's head. He asked. He asked Abeni everything now, before he did any of it. It was a new language for him, and he was slow at it, and he tried it every day. The first time the three of them were in a room together with no machine breathing and no order to withdraw anything, it was that ordinary apartment, and the light was ordinary afternoon light through a window nobody was watching for an exit. Malachi had brought the portrait, the one from the drawer, from under the folded scarf, the one he was never supposed to know about. He set it on the table next to the real man and looked from one to the other, checking, the way he'd checked in the sealed room, and decided they matched. "You have my eyes," Min Jae said to him. His voice was still thin. It carried fine. "Mama said that first," Malachi said. He touched the pendant at his throat, the cord, the small thing he'd carried through a flood and up a stairwell in his socks. He held it out. "This was yours. She kept it for me. She said it was the only thing of yours she had." Min Jae took it in his weak hand and could not quite close his fingers on it, and Abeni reached without thinking and closed his hand around it for him, the way her son had once pried a squeeze out of those same fingers on command. Her hand over his hand. Then Malachi's small hand over both of theirs, the way it had gone on the bed rail in a sealed room when one of them was drowning and the other two were pulling. 3 hands. She had made that shape once before over a body that couldn't feel it, and pressed his wrist and said, "I'm here." To a man who could not hear her. "I'm here," she said now. "I heard you," he said. "In the room, when I couldn't move. I heard you say it." He turned his slow hand over under theirs so his palm came up and held instead of being held. "I've been trying to get back to say it. I'm here." Malachi looked up at both of them, unbothered, a boy who had wandered off a couch and up 10 floors and found his whole father at the top of a stairwell. "Are we having pancakes?" he said. "Yeah, baby," Abeni said. "We're having pancakes." Nobody let go of the hand. This time all 3 of them had chosen it, awake, in the light, with nothing left to hide and nobody left to pay. This time they held on because they wanted to, and they were the ones who decided when to let go, and they didn't, not for a long while, not until the pancakes. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever poured everything into a job where powerful people treated you as invisible until a single truth made them see you? Have you ever recognized a face the world swore was gone forever and trusted what your own hands felt over what everyone told you? And when a child's love reopened a door that money tried to keep shut, would you have found the courage a Benny found? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about truth, motherhood, and karma, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.